Hey, welcome back to Bums in the Bleachers. I'm John, aka the Dram Daddy, alongside my partner Mike Praz, the Praz Master. What's up, Mike? How's it going?
I'm doing amazing. Looks like, our obviously it's games that don't count, but our Cubs are scorching hot, 6-0 to start spring training so far and on our way to Cactus League title. I mean, you know, we'll see where it goes, but hey, two of those wins against the Dodgers too with, two games in Japan coming up against them, so
Yeah, we got a
we'll
couple
see where it
weeks
leads
out.
us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a couple weeks out. It's going to be a weird schedule here, with spring training already kind of begun, and then there's like a little bit of a break where they fly out to Tokyo, play a couple games in Japan against the Dodgers to open the season, and then come back and play a couple weeks before they start the season. So
It,
it's
it's
going to be
always
weird.
it's always the weirdest thing whenever I see like teams starting in Japan like that. Cubs at least get a little bit of a soft landing with how their schedule is set up because like yeah, they'll get back to spring training and then they will be able to kind of sleep in their own beds for a little bit because the regular season will resume for them in Arizona. So, at least, a little bit of an extended like not having to be too jet lagged to start like the rest of the bulk regular season for them. But
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, we're already getting comments. We want to fast forward to the whiskey talk. I know we prefaced our show. We have a special guest. So before we do that, I've got a little clip for everyone.
Is this heaven?
No, it's Iowa.
So
Classic.
we are going to bring in a special guest. I'm really excited. I got a chance to meet this person who's the master distiller of Cedar Ridge. I would think it was about a month ago. Went to Iowa and on a weekend, did the tour of the distillery. Absolutely amazing experience. I mean, the food, the restaurant was amazing. We tasted through a ton of different barrels. As we kind of talked pre-show, it was a day full of drinking, which was a lot of fun. But without further ado, we are going to bring on special guest Murphy Quint, master distiller of Cedar Ridge.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Murphy.
Murphy,
Hey,
how's it going, man?
thanks for
So
joining
we,
us.
Good.
yeah,
Thanks for having me.
super pumped to have you. We named the show after you. Played a little play on words. The Murphy's Bleachers, I thought felt very appropriate with the iconic bar right across the street, and you know,
I
with
love
the
it.
name
I
Murphy.
love
So
it. Yeah.
yes.
I,
So we are, yeah, we're super pumped to have you. I mean, I know we've got, we talked pre-show about some different kind of topics and things to talk through. And, we'll have some guests in the comments too. So anybody who's listening, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in and ask as well. But before we kind of talk baseball, let's talk some whiskey. Right now I'm drinking the Quintessential Wine Club.
good man.
So absolutely just phenomenal. And I'll start off by saying this, like, and I think we talked about it before, like ASM is a new category for me. I've
Yeah.
consistently, drank bourbon, rye, light whiskeys, so this is my first like real American single malt that I've gotten into, just
Yeah.
period, which I think is just, tip of the cap to you, but just because my profile hasn't been that, or maybe it just hasn't, evolved to that point. But I've been a huge fan of everything that you are doing, from an American single malt stand. I have the double barrel rye right here as well, which was for anybody who follows me on Instagram at the Dram Daddy, attached there, was one of my top whiskeys of 2024. Absolutely loved it. Great value for what it is. But yeah, would love to hear about Cedar Ridge, and kind of talk through like your beginnings with within the whiskey world. You talk through your family, the quintessential line, all of it. We would love to hear.
Yeah. So, first of all, thanks for having me on. Really, really glad to be here with you guys doing this. So as mentioned, my name is Murphy Quint. I'm the master distiller, master blender at Cedar Ridge Distillery. We are a winery distillery combination, believe it or not, in Swisher, Iowa. For those of you who don't know where Swisher is, which I'm guessing is almost everyone listening, it is a very small town in between Cedar Rapids and Iowa City, if you're familiar with at least that area. So Cedar Rapids and Iowa City being the second and third biggest cities in Iowa, we're kind of nestled right between them. So you mentioned that about a month ago you were out to the distillery. We had a ton of fun, and you saw that at this point we're actually a fairly sizable distillery. We have about 8,000 barrels on the property right now. We're distributing bourbon, single malt, and a little bit of rye to about 35 different states. We're doing some exporting to about 4 or 5 different countries. So we're fairly sizable at this point, but that couldn't be further from the case from where we started out. So I want to kind of go back to the very beginning. And when we started, the entire plan, my parents, by the way, started the company. The entire plan was back in 2005 when we put this together, was really to be this very little family owned winery. I mean, it was both of my parents grew up on family farms. If you're from the state of Iowa and your family's been from Iowa, there's a very good chance that your parents grew up on farms. And that is very true with both of my parents. And so I think they always had this desire to do something with working the land, but not necessarily growing field corn, which is typically what you do in Iowa as a farmer. You grow corn or soybeans. They wanted to kind of do something with the land, but slightly different. And so that concept presented the opportunity to start a vineyard. My dad was very passionate about wine at the time. And so the distillery at that point was, it was part of the plan, but it was really a very small differentiator to our winery. You know, why would I go to Cedar Ridge Winery? Well, they also have this distillery side of things. It was kind of going to be our hook, our niche, if you will. And as time went on, things really evolved, became a little bit more 50-50 wine and whiskey. And then in about 2010, we had this light bulb moment. By we, I really mean my dad came up with this idea. Hey, we're in Iowa, which is the corn capital of the world. And bourbon, by law, has to be made from primarily corn. Yet there is no one in the state of Iowa producing bourbon. And so we started doing that. And in 2010, we actually released our first batch, and it sold like hotcakes. I mean, people in the state of Iowa went absolutely nuts over it. And that's when we realized, hey, you know, there's maybe this is a bigger opportunity than we thought. And we kind of flip-flopped into more of a distillery that has a winery as a differentiator. So that's kind of where we're at today. We still to this day have vineyards surrounding our building, as you saw when you were here. We still produce some really good wines, but we are primarily bourbon and single malt focused as far as distribution on a national scale goes. So that's what we're doing out here. You know, I can sit here and ramble on and on about it forever, but the best way to understand what we're doing is to just actually come out to the distillery. We've got a really good tasting room. We get over 100,000 visitors a year through it. Really good scenery, really good food products to try. So get out here and check it out for yourself. Highly recommend it.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was like I said, it's a wonderful time. I mean, it's it definitely like you can see the operation growing for what it is, right?
Mhm.
You know, like when we were there, but still felt incredibly intimate. You know, like I think that's probably one of my favorite things, like going to craft distilleries where you still get to rub shoulders, with master distillers and master blenders, have like just real conversation, real tastings, get to see like the different rick houses and the setups and the growth that's happening, right? Versus like and I've been to Heaven Hill, I've been to
Yeah.
some of the bigger ones like that Wild Turkey, and they're great. You don't get as much of the intimate feel that you do with some of these craft distilleries like Cedar Ridge. So anybody who wants to take a 4-hour drive, I highly recommend it. It is such a good time. And again, the food was just unbelievable. It was so good.
Yeah, yeah, and so to your point on that, it actually took us a very long time to figure that out because I've been to I've done tours of like Buffalo Trace and things like that, which is a great tour, by the way. I'm not by any means knocking on it, but the place is like hospital clean. It's a very professionally run tour. I mean, a lot of times you got like a guy with a microphone and stuff like that. We, for the longest time, we were like, all right, that's what we need to be. We need to really make things organized and make sense out of everything. And that's when we realized that we're actually doing it wrong. What people want to see when they come out here is more of a personal setting where they can actually, like you said, talk to the people who are making the product and see
Right.
that it doesn't really make sense for this tank to be next to that still, things like that. But I see how that's how you have grown and evolved, and so that's why things are the way that they are. They want to see something that's a little bit more legit, something that seems like a family started it up and built it over time. It just seems a little bit more authentic and real. So once we finally started embracing that, it really changed our company, and we started getting more true whiskey fans out here to actually see our whiskey operation.
Yeah, I love that. And you were talking about, bourbon rye focus, the American single
Yeah.
malt, and I think it's I think it's really interesting. We're like at this point in time in the whiskey world where, American single malt is such a growing category that is just starting to, in my opinion, just starting to take off. And, we know it's been around for a long time, it's been around, but we obviously seen the newest update back in January with the TTB that added the new definition of American single malt as a legal definition, right?
Yeah.
What has that meant to you, as you have been an American single malt, maker, and I know there was some excitement that you were posting about it when it happened, but we'd just love to hear your perspective, for the growth of this, category, and also just this edition.
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, it's really exciting times on that front. This is the first new category of whiskey that the TTB has ratified, I believe, since the 1970s, and that would have been light whiskey. So this is not something that happens very often, where a new whiskey category emerges, and so it's something that I take a lot of pride in. That I was at least a player in it and involved in building this category and kind of getting people on board with it. And hopefully one day my grandchildren and their children will actually consume American single malt that we got to be a part of. So it's kind of a historical thing. It's something I take a lot of pride in, but it's also really exciting for both producers and consumers alike, because it's this whole new category of whiskey, like I said, but the range of flavor profiles that a producer can create within it is so much wider than any other category. And I don't by any means mean that as like a knock on bourbon or rye, but once you put those whiskeys in the barrel, there's really only so much you can do to modify the flavor profile after that. When you're working with single malt, cask finishing single malt, or secondary cask maturation, utilizing things like port casks, sherry casks, rum casks, that's really my jam. And I have a hard time being done producing a batch because there's still more tweaking that I can do to it. So it's really fun from a producer standpoint. And that relates directly over to a benefit to a consumer as well, because now as a consumer, if you're truly a whiskey geek like myself, you can explore this new range of flavors within this new category. So it's really exciting for those people who haven't had the chance to check it out. Yeah, I highly recommend doing so. Like I said, it's just a whole new world to explore right now.
Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely wild, and I think that you do a very I mean, I've told you, and I think the whiskey community talks about it pretty often. You do a pretty phenomenal job with your finishing when it comes to American single malts. I mean, it just
Yeah.
some really wild, unique profiles, to your point, and I'm just looking at this, here alone, the wine club. So I don't even know if it's hit our market yet. I don't think it's hit the Chicago market yet, but
It actually, it'll get there in 2 weeks. Yep.
okay,
Oh,
cool.
nice.
So
There you go.
this is one I would highly recommend for, anybody who is, getting into the American single malt category. I absolutely love this. This is a so I'm going to read this off. 2-row pale malted barley, aged in ex-bourbon barrels, finished in first fill Amontillado sherry, Tokai and Moscatel cask, blended with peated malt, finished in Pinot Noir cask. That was a mouthful, but
Wow.
the mouthful is pretty phenomenal when
Mhm.
when you get to it. So um definitely, I ordered this, obviously, from your direct website. It was sent to
Yep.
Distillery sent, obviously, absolutely loved it. And I've been through the Untitled Cigar project, which was last year's. And then I want to say, what was the one before that? That it was the
Port side. Yep.
Port Side. Yes, Port Side. So, and I mean, the acceptance amongst the community, and I think just the amount of like talking that has happened with all three of these, really, like as they've kind of rolled out, has been just absolutely astronomical. And even just behind closed doors, beyond just like, the whiskey influencer thing, like just if when you talk to people in the community like about it, like just high praise across the boards. It's been absolutely awesome.
Hey, thank you. I really appreciate the support and kind words there. On the cash fit, so basically on these projects, what's really working so well is one, I've had a lot of experience with utilizing these secondary casks or finishing casks, whatever you want to call them, because Cedar Ridge is also a winery. We've had these fun casks around, and I've kind of had my own little playground with them to explore and learn on. So I was able to kind of hone some blending skills from all that over time. But what has also helped, in addition to the product being great, is that it's exciting. It's marketable in a way, and it's really tailored to people like us, who I would call whiskey geeks, who really want to dive into the details of all this. And what it's doing is it's taking single malt. When we think single malt, a lot of times we think of Scotch because they've been a powerhouse single malt producer for centuries and centuries now. But it's taking what they do and kind of taking it to a new level. For example, in Scotland, you'll see a lot of, this is the 15-year sherry cask finish or whatever, and they're amazing. But instead of stopping there, I thought it'd be more fun to kind of take a sherry cask finish, port cask finish, rum cask finish, and do some blends together. Obviously, it needs to be of quality, it needs to be balanced, but I thought that'd be fun for single malt consumers to explore because those flavor profiles with those blends and concoctions, they haven't really been offered on the market before for consumers to explore. So it's really taking something that had kind of been done and then just building off of it to a slightly different level. And I've been having a lot of fun doing it. It's something that, like I said, the market hasn't really seen. So it's a newer style of whiskey that we're producing, but it's just been a ton of fun. I'm so honored that people have received it well so far.
So do you think this is going to be, I guess, what is your priority or what is your focus moving forward as a distillery? I mean, obviously you have the quintessential line, with the American single malts, you do have bourbons, ryes, the double barrel bourbon, double barrel ryes. I mean, I think I've seen Amontillado sherry finish, bourbons, and there's a ton of different finishes you've had with your bourbons, but where do you think your focus is going forward? Are you going to continue to focus more in American single malt world? Are you going to have more heavily on bourbon as a category? Like, where's, I guess, the needle pushing you?
It's a good question. It's a bit of a complicated one because our industry is in a pretty weird spot right now. Market saturation is at a crazy standpoint when it comes to American whiskey, and that is because so when we opened up in 2005, we were like the 40th, 50th distillery outside of Kentucky to open up. So it was a very untapped market. Now there's 3,000 distilleries outside of Kentucky. So over the last 20-ish years, there's just been an explosion of distilleries coming online. And now a lot of them have product that is aged and of quality. And so you're getting a pretty crazy logjam on the shelves. It's getting very competitive out there, and it's getting harder and harder to stand out. So because of that, what we're doing is being very strategic. A quick detour. So in the state of Iowa, we have the #1 selling bourbon in the state. And I know that might not sound that impressive at first thought, but in 49 states, Kentucky bourbon is the #1 selling bourbon. And then in the state of Iowa, Cedar Ridge has claimed that spot. So we've done something here in Iowa with bourbon that hadn't really been done before and still hasn't to this day anywhere else. Hopefully we see more of it with other craft distilleries. But so we've kind of established a really good bourbon business in Iowa that we want to maintain and build off of in our state and in some of the surrounding states. Outside of that, on more of a national scale, we're pushing single malt a lot. And the reason being because it's a newer category. It's a smaller market still until it, starts to expand. And so what we're doing is we're selling, smaller quantities to a wider reach of distribution. So basically at a very concentrated area, we're focused on pushing bourbon. In a larger area, we're pushing single malt. And so that is really distribution strategy. When it comes to just production tactics and styles in general, we will do a little bit. We're going to take it a little bit to the next level of what we're already doing. For instance, I keep talking about secondary cask maturation. That's our whole thing with these quintessential single malts is that we're using all these fun casks to finish our single malt in. Well, we're going to start increasing the amount of that we're doing with our bourbons as well, just because that's fun for people to explore. It won't be quite the same, but we want to do fun blends of bourbon finished in Amontillado and rum and things just like our single malt program, because it's giving people something new to explore. So that's really where we're headed at this point in time.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I mean, I think even just as consumers, we feel that oversaturation, in the whiskey community too, right? Where it's like, there's so many different things on the shelves now. There's so many types of finishes. I think you're seeing a lot more, NDPs out there now, that are, buying and just sourcing and just bottling. And there's a lot, right? And I think you're starting to see some of that, secondary market starting to come down a bit. You're starting to see some of these allocated, products starting to sit a little bit longer. Are you as a distiller seeing and feeling this so-called bourbon bubble burst? Do you think that that is the reality, or do you think it's just a slowdown? Is it peaks and valleys, to the business? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes and no. It's a complicated one to answer.
Yeah.
There is a bit of a bourbon bubble bursting, but it's not necessarily less bourbons being purchased. It's just that it is nearly impossible for a distillery to gain brand loyalty, and that's a huge
Oh,
problem because there is so much overhead in creating a distillery. I mean, think about a brewery. There's a lot of overhead in that too. Now imagine if they had to age the product for 5-6 years before they saw any return on that investment.
wow.
So for the first time in basically the history of whiskey, it's so saturated that I can't get someone to keep buying our product. I'm a huge whiskey geek. If I'm going to buy a bottle, we'll take Cedar Ridge out of the mix. I'm going to buy a bottle from Distillery A today, and if I buy one tomorrow, it's going to be from Distillery B. I'm going to keep
Yeah.
exploring new products and jumping around, and that's really cool from a consumer side of things. But from a producer side,
Yeah.
producers need to get loyalty so they have repeat business and they can continue to grow, or at the very least make things sustainable. So there is a bit of a bubble bursting. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's like bourbon is bursting. I would say that there are a lot of distilleries competing for the same amount of consumers that there were a few years ago, and that's getting extremely difficult. So I think in a way that does suggest that there's probably not a super happy ending for a lot of distilleries in the next 5 to 10 years. We're probably going to see a bit of a market correction on that front. But I do not think that bourbon, single malt rye, like that's all of a sudden just going to fall off the face of the earth and people are going to stop drinking it. I think the market's just going to settle. There's going to be some really good producers that stick around, and they will continue to put
Mhm.
out good whiskey. The consumers probably get a little bit more loyal to over time.
Yeah, and I think that's where, like, again, I'm really, I think my focus for this year, as somebody who is a whiskey enthusiast, and on Instagram, really kind of just sharing the love and passion for for the spirit. It is leaning into some of those craft distilleries that I
Yes.
talk about it all the time. It's like when you go to a restaurant, you know, y- you get great service, right? Maybe the meal is really good, but the great service makes the meal even better, right? Like,
Yep.
I think that's the beauty of craft distilleries, that really, they look out for the consumer. They look out, and what I mean by that too is, I think your pricing at Cedar Ridge has always been
Yeah.
incredibly affordable for what it is. I mean, it's high quality. I mean, you grow the grains on ground. And I know that's our next topic. We're going to talk about, like, the Iowa thing, right? But
Yep.
having your corn, your own grains. I mean, everything I've had, I've really enjoyed. And not only that, the price is just like, I mean, I picked up this double barrel, straight rye. This was
Yeah.
grain to glass, which again, I love that. Um, this was like $60, I think, $55 or something. I can't remember, but it was
Yep.
right around that. Lights out. Lights out for the price. I mean,
Exactly.
just unreal. And I mean, even like these, when we talk about LTOs, right? Like with allocated product and stuff like that, even like your limited time offerings like that,
Yeah.
99 bucks, $100. I
Yeah.
mean, I'll pay that every, 10 out of 10 times.
Yeah, and that's something that we've been very focused on is pricing. One, we're in the state of Iowa. We're fairly modest people. We're fairly modest consumers, at least locally. And so when we were starting out, before we had national distribution and we were mainly just selling locally, we really needed to keep that in mind. So, our most popular product is a $30 bottle. Like you said, our specialty
Oh,
bourbons are
wow.
about $59.99.
Mhm.
And then our single malts range anywhere from $59.99 to $99.99, just depending on what they are and the cost that went in them. So we've always been very focused on having a lower price point compared to the competition. And part of that actually roots from we have been around when it comes to craft distilling. We're fairly almost ancient. I mean, most craft distilleries open up the last 5 to 10 years. We've been open 20, and I know compared to like Buffalo Trace, that's nothing because they've been around since, prohibition times. But
Right.
in craft distilling, we've been around a while, and early on, it was really hard to get people to want to drink craft whiskey because I would constantly hear craft means crap, and it was because there were a lot of Yeah, there were a lot of new distilleries online at that point in time. And in fairness to the consumers that were saying that, a lot of the product was too young. It wasn't ready. People didn't know what they were doing yet. And so there was a lot of craft whiskey that was crap. And I'm sure that, we played a role in that as well and probably put some stuff out that wasn't stellar. So because of that, we did not want to price ourselves out of the market early on. And that went well for us. And as we've grown as a distillery, I think quality has really come a long way. We've tried to maintain a modest price point. And the way that I've been saying it lately is we are very, very focused on providing good value for a purchase. And when I say that, it doesn't matter which bottle I'm talking about, the $30 bottle or the $99 bottle. If you buy that, I want you to feel like you won the deal. If you spend $30, I want you to taste the whiskey and say that was probably worth $40. That's kind of what we're focused on, because if you buy $100 bottle from us and it drinks like a $50 bottle, we know that you're never coming back. There's too much competition. Right. We're going to lose you forever. And so we have been very focused on providing value to our consumers. We make sure that the product is better than the price point, because the minute that we fail at that, we're done.
That's awesome. It really is. I mean, like I said, and I think what it does too, it gives the consumer like a little bit more confidence to maybe spend like the 30, $40 to try something, right? Because I think it's always so scary when you go, to even, legacy brand or craft distillery or an NDP, where you're like, this bottle is 80 to 90 to $100. I've never really had a lot from them. It's such a gamble at that point, right? And then like if you don't like it, you're stuck with 748 milliliters versus 750 of the bottle. So
Right.
Exactly. Yep. It's always, and with the price of anything right now, it is so risky to spend even $60 on a bottle, exactly like you said. So you have to make sure that you gain a reputation. Someone's providing that value, like I said. Otherwise, word's going to spread. People aren't going to take a chance on you, and you're going to be screwed from there. Yeah.
Well, Mike, I know you had I've got some fan questions that were submitted to me that I want to get to, but Mike, I know you had some questions like pre-show that you might want to ask.
For sure. I mean, I'm someone who is a total whiskey novice. John can attest to, as I'm normally drinking a beer on the show. I figured on a special occasion, pour myself a nice glass of some bourbon here. I guess, just you saying that you guys were like the first big distiller in Iowa, like I'm surprised by that, with like, the corn production there, that corn is a direct product needed to create whiskey. Does that help it make it a little more, is that a major factor in helping you guys stay more cost effective than most, would you say?
Yeah, to a certain extent, yes, it is. I mean, when you're working with any sort of commodity, to be closer to where it's actually grown or produced is going to be cost effective. So, I mean, the fact that we can literally get it from, from where I sit right now, there's a cornfield 100 yards away from me. And so, I mean, it's not like we're pulling corn out of that field, but we could if we needed to. It's just kind of a benefit to being in the state. But what it does do for us is a couple things. One, our soil here in Iowa, as well as in eastern Illinois, kind of that little belt area, produces unbelievable corn. And that's just what the soil can produce here, as well as soybeans, obviously. But just to have that advantage means that we've got a great raw material to produce our bourbon. Similar to if you're going to make bread or anything else, the ingredients that you start with, they're going to have a big impact on the overall quality of the product. But and in addition to that, it does just help. It helped establish us early on that we were an Iowa distillery making Iowa bourbon from Iowa corn. We're supporting the farmers; they're supporting us. It was kind of this friendly thing, and it helped build some really, really good partnerships with us and farmers. So it's been a big thing. I do want to clear one thing up though. When we started out with the corn, it actually did start. We were pulling corn from a family farm that we have in a small town of Winthrop, Iowa. Eventually, that became fairly logistically complicated as we grew in size and started producing a lot more bourbon. So now we have pivoted to we will get every kernel of corn from the state of Iowa, not necessarily family farm, but we will always produce Iowa corn because we're making an Iowa product originally for Iowans, and now to send to other states to enjoy an Iowan made whiskey as well.
Very nice.
That's awesome. Well, Before we because we're here to talk, not only whiskey, but obviously talk baseball, right? And we
Yes,
have you
sir.
on because I know you're a huge Cubs fan. I love that about you. Obviously, it's a connection that we can share beyond the whiskey world is, just Cub fandom. But before we kind of, do that, I did want to plug because I talked about the tour and visiting your distillery and doing being part of a barrel pick team. I did want to plug Malloy's Finest, the single barrel release that is coming out. I want to
Yes.
say it's next month. Is it April that we're?
I think I can't speak to when they're going to release it. That's entirely
Okay.
up to them.
Yeah.
I can say that it actually is scheduled to ship this coming Friday
Okay.
over to them. So there'll be a slight delay from when they get it from there, but at that point it becomes their choice on when they actually
Yeah.
release it to the public. But I'm guessing they're not going to wait super long for that.
Yeah, and we talked pre-show. I was, on that pick team, which was just such a fun experience to just, I mean, we were joking around pre-show, like I was telling Mike, like, when you go on these like picks, like typically you're, especially like the big boy distilleries, right? Like the legacy distilleries, you're doing like maybe 4 to 6 barrels you're kind of tasting through. I think
Yeah.
Wild Turkey, I think I did like six. Knob Creek, you're doing like 4 to 5. Elijah Craig, you're doing maybe like 4 to 6, and everything's already kind of predetermined and picked from the barrel, right? Like it's already like, hey, here's the barrels we're willing to sell your shop. Here are the ones you can pick from. You go through them, and then it's quick. It's like bam, bam, bam. We spent like several hours. I mean, we spent the entire day. It was we went in early. We left at like 8:30 in the morning. We got there at like noon 30. Um, Y'all fed us, which I appreciate carving up before that craziness because we probably went through like and just to share the show, none of us drive. Okay, we were responsible. We took a bus. There was a rented bus that drove us 4 hours there, 4 hours back. So
Good.
we probably went through like God, it felt like 20 barrels at that point. Um, and when we got to this one, it was so wild, and I couldn't recall if I was like, "Damn, was that really good?" or was I just like already just hammered at that point? Like, and I
Already
couldn't
lost your
remember
sense
if it
of
was
taste by that point. Yeah.
yeah, like what? Yeah,
Yeah.
oh, for sure, your palate could definitely get fried, right?
Right.
It was, Patty. Yes, it was a ton of barrels we went through, and to Murphy's credit, Murphy is so passionate and so excited to share, the beautiful creations that he has. He's there thieving every barrel. He's pouring in glasses, like, oh, try this, try this, try this. And at a point, I was like, dude, I don't know if I can go anymore. To where I'm at. It was so fun though, and we ended up picking this one. It was a single cask finish. It was an American single malt finished in añejo tequila barrels.
Yep.
I last week got to go back to the sample, and holy shit! I mean, it was unbelievably wild. And when I was so quiet, and Steve Malloy, the owner of Malloy's Finest Wine and Spirits, he was like, I was quiet for a little bit. I tasted, I was quiet, and I was like, dude, this is wild, and he's like good wild or bad wild? I'm like, let me tell you this. I'm like, it drank like an American single malt. Like first, on the nose, like you got so much of, like the chocolate notes. You got some of the floral notes from like the tequila finished. The agave, like sweet honey, and then it like hit the palate like an ASM, but finished like I was like, I'm very sure I just took a shot of tequila. Like you got
Yeah.
so much of that the tequila on the finish. It was like it finished just like a tequila, like all the floral notes, like all the agave, like man, it lights out pick. I'm so excited for this one too.
Hey, yeah, I'm pumped about it as well. I'm gonna make sure that I get my hands on a couple of those bottles. And yeah, to your point, we tried a ton of barrels that day, and I think it says something as far as, I mean, by default, as far as quality goes, that this is the best one that we tasted. I mean, that's the one that you guys decided to pick, and so I'm really excited to get it to market. But lastly, I'll say that yeah, man, the tequila finish on it is awesome, and it's really important because when it comes to secondary cask maturation, that's what we're going for. We want it to taste like single malt because it is a single malt, but we also want that special cask to impart some flavors as well. That's the whole point, right? So the fact that you get an American single malt that kind of transitions into a very strong tequila finish, that means that it's a really well done project, because that's exactly what we're going for. Yeah.
Awesome. Love it. Well, I will be, for anyone who follows me on Instagram, follow closely. I will be sharing all that info as it's coming out. Baloney here asks, are you at liberty to say what tequila barrels it was finished in?
So that's a really good question. And without going way down a huge rabbit hole, I'll mention that the secondary barrel market is a really interesting thing right now. There's this huge circulation of barrels getting shipped all over the planet. And one of the things that is usually the case is that they'll try to sand off any old logos, things like that, so that you can't figure out specifically which distillery it came from or which winery it came from, things like that. Because if that's going to be the case, a lot of times you're going to get NDAs and things like that involved, and you're going to need permission to show them on social media. So the market has generally decided not to tell new buyers where the barrels were previously utilized at. I will say that every now and then you can do a little detective work and figure it out, which is always fun to try and do. But unfortunately, where these ones came from in particular, I truly cannot speak to that because I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Gotcha. So before we talk baseball, I want to go rapid fire. We've got some fan questions I want to ask you. So someone asked, what kind of barrel finish are you currently working on that maybe some people wouldn't be expecting you to be working on? If you can share that.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a few different answers. I'll give you two. One, I'm working on our next special release right now. You talked about the Wine Club special release, and that one hasn't really made it out to market yet. Over the next few weeks, it should be in about 35 different states, which is awesome. But because of that, I'm already working on the next one because it has to be in bottle like 3 months before we're going to distribute it. So I'm working on that right now. And I will say that this next one is the first one that has no Amontillado cherry influence in it. That has kind of been my staple, and it's kind of a little safety blanket that I utilize in my blends as single malt that's influenced by these Amontillado cherry casks. And so this next one doesn't have any of that in it, which allows me to kind of get out of my comfort zone and explore some new practices. Outside of that, one thing that I'm spending a lot of time on right now, and I'm really excited about it, is for the first time ever, we have a lot of wine casks that we're finishing single malt in that came from specific vineyards on our own property. So in the past, we've worked with a lot of red wine casks, and many of them from our own winery, but they weren't necessarily specific grape varietals that we grew on site and made wine from. And now I finally have those at my disposal. So, for example, I've been messing around with these Marquette wine barrels, which is a grape varietal that is not super well known. It's going to be specific to the Midwest, so it can withstand our winters. But I've been utilizing those to finish single malt in. I've been utilizing about 3-4 different varietals, and I'm excited to put some stuff out that really just has a cool story behind it, because we grew these grapes about 100 yards away from where I'm sitting right now. And then we made wine out of them in one of our buildings here, aged that in the barrel, and then used that same barrel to finish our single malt in. Just the amount of people involved in that, the amount of years involved in that, I just find that to be really cool. And I think it's going to be a fun challenge to try to make something special out of them.
Love that. What is a barrel finish you can't obtain right now that maybe you would like to obtain and finish in, but you just can't get your hands on it yet?
So I will say, I don't know if there's like a specific style of cask that I haven't had the opportunity to work with that I really want to. There's probably a couple that escape me. But I can say there are some casks that I've had that made amazing whiskey that I have not been able to get again. And that's been a bit of an issue. For instance, someone just in the comments mentioned Muscatel. We got some just killer Muscatel casks that made this amazing single malt. And I'm trying to work with the broker to say, hey, I know you can't tell me exactly where those came from, but could you please get me more barrels from exactly that same place? Because it worked really well with our single malt. And that's happened with a few different casks, Sauterne casks. I have finally dialed in with Amontillado Cherry. Did we get them from a specific bodega, things like that. So every now and then I'll get one, a finishing cask, and I'll just get like a couple of them, and they produce something amazing. And then I try to go back and get like 20 of them, and for one reason or another, I'm unable to. So I that would be my answer for that front. I tried most casks, but there are some that I cannot get repeat buys of.
Okay. With with the definition of American single malts hitting the TTB, there was no mention of adding coloring to the American single malt. Like, obviously bourbon has,
Mhm.
you can't add any color to it. They didn't
Yep.
do that with ASM. Is that something you wish they would have done? You hope that they maybe amend in the future? Are you indifferent? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and I can say in our community of American single malt distillers, when we were coming up with proposed definitions and things of that nature, that was a really hot topic. There were a few different American Craft Spirits Association conferences over the last couple of years, where all of us were in the kind of the same rooms working on this stuff, and I would say that that was one of the more divisive topics, where a pretty even split of people felt one way, and a pretty even split of people felt the other. I wouldn't say that I have like extremely strong opinions on that. I have always liked the idea of not utilizing caramel coloring. Even with our bourbon, we don't use caramel coloring here. If we have a batch that's a little bit lighter in flavor profile, well, we just deal with it. It's just going to be a little bit lighter, or sorry, in like color. When you're walking
Mhm.
down a shelf looking at the bottle, if it looks a little light, then it's a little light. That's just the hand that we were dealt on that front. It's not a huge problem. Uh, some distilleries really like the option to be able to kind of enhance that color because it works a lot like packaging. It might draw the eyes to it. Perceived value might be received a little bit differently. So I get the different opinions of that. I personally would prefer to not utilize caramel coloring, but not to the point where I'm going to stand up and die on that hill.
Okay, cool. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Is a hot dog? No, it is not a sandwich. I
Good
don't
man.
know what it is, but it's not a sandwich. Yeah.
It's a hot dog.
It's a hot dog. Yeah.
I've heard people make the case before that a hot dog is really a taco because like the open end of it kind of.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could.
I don't know that it is, but it might be more of a taco than a sandwich. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I don't know if I agree. I don't know if it would be a taco, but you know what? It wouldn't make me as mad calling it a taco as it would as calling it a sandwich. I feel like when people say it's a sandwich, I get like physically like I'm about to have an aneurysm. Like that. Yeah.
I think that one of the most important criteria for a sandwich is that in the name you say the word sandwich. For instance, if you're going to eat a ham sandwich, it's called a ham sandwich. If a hot dog was a sandwich, I think it would be called a hot dog sandwich. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
I can't think of any sandwiches that don't have. Well,
Philly
I guess like a
cheesesteak, maybe Cuban. Yeah.
Is a Philly cheesesteak a sandwich?
Oh, absolutely, it is.
Yeah. See,
I don't know. I don't know. I feel like
uh,
that could be considered like maybe like the hoaggie department. Like if you
Have
really
we
wanted to
stumbled
go.
across the next great American? Is it a sandwich? Is it not a sandwich debate?
Well, maybe what we're missing is a category, and maybe hot dogs and Philly cheesesteaks are in the same category.
Maybe. There we
go. Yeah, maybe that's what's going on. We're just lacking a category.
Yeah, I feel like instead of answering the one question, we're just creating like a slew of other ones instead. But your favorite whiskey to pair watching a Cubs game?
Yeah, it depends. It's going to depend on the situation. If it's just a regular game, I want kind of a background bourbon, one that's not really a thinker, one that I can just kind of enjoy as like a compliment to the experience. If it is unlike a big game, if it's Game 7 of the World Series, I kind of want something bigger and bolder that's going to stand up to what that experience is going to offer. So I would probably have, if it's our own product, I'd have one of our special releases. If it's not our product, I might have a really fancy scotch. But if it's just a standard game, and I'm eating hot dogs, non-sandwiches, and I just want I just want a very basic bourbon, something that I really don't have to think about, just a nice little sipper. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Last one for you. This is a tough one. So somebody submitted this. It's a would you rather almost.
Would
you rather give up whiskey entirely or give up the Cubs World Series win in 2016?
That's the easiest decision in the world. I give up whiskey entirely.
Let's go. Let's go. I knew I liked this guy.
I've said for a very long time, people have been asking me, is there any career that would get you out of whiskey? And I've said on record many times, The only thing that would get me out of whiskey is a front office job with the Chicago Cubs.
Nice.
I would it doesn't even need to be a high up one. Just like put me in the building. But no, I've been a huge Cubs fan my whole life. And to give that up would be impossible. Whiskey I could walk away from and just get another job. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. That's real, man. That's super
Yeah.
real. And I feel like it's, this is why we do this podcast, because this is like legitimately like Mike and I. So Mike and I we're about 10 years apart, but I mean,
Yeah.
the passion for this team has been like real from birth for both of us. I mean,
Yep.
like legit,
Yeah.
like, I mean, I know I tagged you in the reel that I made. I was kind of joking about my wife and stuff like that. And so that's a running joke that my wife and I have. Because we got married in 2016. So we got married July of 2016. And I'm gonna be honest, so this was when we planned our wedding, it was in 2015, right? And it was right, kind of before, like right when the Cubs were getting hot, leading to the end of the year, where they just like went on this massive run, finished with 97 wins, won the wild card. I was living in Pittsburgh in the time. I actually went to that wild card game when they beat Pittsburgh 4-0 in that shutout game with Arrieta. I told my wife when we were planning our wedding, I was like, we can't do it in October. And she's like,
Right.
why can't we do it in October? And I'm like, this team is ascending, and I'm like, I know, like I've been heartbroken a million times before,
Mhm.
but in the off chance that this miracle happens in 2016, I cannot, I can't, like, if you want me to stand you up at the altar, you would pick October as the date for our wedding. So I'm just letting you know. So she knew, like, and it was super funny because, like, she didn't really care about baseball until, we started dating, and when we started dating, I was like, hey, I watch every Cubs game I can watch. Like, and I'm telling you right now, from April through September, like if you want to go out on a Saturday night and the Cubs are playing a Saturday night game, we're not going on Saturday night. Like I'm sitting there watching the Cubs.
Exactly.
Like it's just, and if you can't deal with that, you can't deal with it, right? Like it just kind of is what it is. But I don't think she realized it until we started dating. And I think it was funny when they lost in 2015. She was very much like, "Oh my God, this is so heartbreaking." And so how do you deal with this? I'm like, I've been dealing with this since 1985.
Right.
You've done 1 year of this, like,
Yeah,
um,
I actually had a kind of a similar thing. I mean, I had a lifelong Cubs fan. My great grandpa, whose last name was Murphy, I'm named after him. My great grandpa.
There you go. Nice.
Yeah, he was born in like I think like 1913, 1914. I mean, he's no longer around, obviously, but some of my earliest memories are actually sitting in his living room and on a very old style TV watching the Chicago Cubs in very low definition. And so those are some of my oldest memories. And I remember him just living, breathing, eating the Chicago Cubs. And so the man lived and died without ever seeing a Cubs World Series. And in 2016, in April, my first child was born. And so we have been following the Cubs all year long, obviously, but the experience during Game 7 of being able to hold my own daughter while I watched us win the World Series was just like an absolute top memory of my life. And I still to this day tell her, it's kind of a joke and she doesn't really get it, but like, your great great grandpa lived and died without a World Series, and you saw one 6 months after you were born. And so, very similar, man. That stuff it runs deep, and very very glad that I got to have that experience.
I love that. That's awesome. That's such a good story.
Could I chime in with one story similar to what you were saying, John? So, so I entered a relationship in August of 2016, and about 2 months into it, one of her best friends wound up getting married. It was in the middle of October. Thankfully, it happened to fall on like the off day between when they were coming back from LA to Chicago before they won the pennant. So like I was like contemplating the entire time, like, are we really going to go to this wedding when like, potentially missing the Cubs clinching the pennant? But thankfully, the schedule worked out perfectly then. So yeah.
That's awesome.
And by the way, I see Gabe Bearstown 19 show in the comment. Gabe, I see you're challenging me to race lot B. I don't know if I'll be there for the Sox home opener for Whiskey at Comiskey. Still got to figure out if I'm getting a ticket for that or not. But for the Cubs White Sox Whiskey at Comiskey in July, we can definitely do it then if you want to, brother.
All right, there you go. There's the challenge accepted. Yeah, it's funny. I actually, one of my best friends, he got married in October of 2016, and he's a Sox fan. So at that point, he didn't know what playoff baseball really, what meant either. So he had his wedding, and it was game one of the NLDS against the Giants. And I was like, bro, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to your wedding, but I'm watching the game on my phone. So I hope you're not offended. Like, I will sit there quietly and I'll have like a headphone in or something. And like legit, we watched, and it was funny because everyone gathered around our table because I had the game on my phone, and everyone's watching like game one, and Javi's bomb win it in the bottom of the eighth against, Lester against
Cueto.
Cueto. Yeah, Johnny Cueto.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, great game. But
absolutely.
yeah, let's talk Iowa baseball. Iowa whiskey, Iowa baseball. Two of the most American things we can talk about, right? Like, and I think that's part of the reason why we had you on, right? It's like Americana to its finest.
You got it.
Yeah, tell us about your Cubs fandom. Like, I know you're a huge fan. You kind of shared a couple stories. I know you wanted to share, maybe share another one, but yeah, talk to us about that.
Yeah. So I mean, like I said, grew up a Cubs fan my entire life. I mean, in the 1990s, that's kind of when I grew up, and obviously the world was very different than it is now. But I mean, when I was, like 7, 8 years old, my next door neighbor and I, we would, every time there was a Cubs game on in the summer, we'd ride our bikes like 2 miles to a gas station and buy soda, ride it back, and we'd watch the Cubs in his basement. I mean, so that's like a huge part of my childhood, is just nonstop watching the Cubs, and it was really fun stuff. But I do have kind of a funny story related to the state of Iowa. Obviously, here we have the Iowa Cubs. A lot of Chicago Cubs fandom in this state, and most of it is from Chicago. But the fact that we have the farm system here is also really cool, and it helps that the last couple of years it's actually been a very, very fun team to watch due to us having so many amazing prospects. And so, the Iowa Cubs. About 3-4 years ago, it was during COVID, so time is always weird to reference with that situation in mind. But around the COVID times, I had the pleasure of being invited to throw out a first pitch at an Iowa Cubs game, and it
awesome.
Was. I was very excited about it. It was a huge honor, obviously. But so backing up, I played baseball my entire life, and I was pretty decent. I couldn't hit worth crap. I was a really good defensive player, though. I was a defensive specialist a lot of times in early high school. I got DH for and stuff like that, but I could catch anything, and I had an absolute cannon. So that was kind of my thing. But what happened was, once I had kids, I stopped playing. I got busy, stopped playing slow pitch softball, things of that nature. Anyway, so getting back to the Iowa Cubs, I got invited to throw out this first pitch, and I just assumed, it's been a few years since I've played slow pitch softball or baseball.
Oh no!
I'm sure throwing a baseball is the same as I remember it has always been. It's not going to be a problem at all. And so for some reason,
oh no,
I went into it with all the confidence in the world, and I got out there and I straight up like spiked the ball into the ground. It was one of those situations where I threw it and I heard like the whole crowd go, "Oh!" It was not good. Of course, we had like everyone from Cedar Ridge came to watch that happen, and so we still joke about it constantly. And so, if anyone from the Iowa Cubs organization is watching, I'm starting my campaign to get a second shot at that.
Give him another chance. Exactly. Please.
Let me back out there. Let me redeem myself.
Let me, let's hit up Porter, Porter Hodge, and we'll see what he can do to campaign and try to get you. There needs to be a redemption. If you ever watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, like Buckner's redemption, that's Murphy's redemption right there.
Yep. There you go.
We need to see that because at least you didn't like 50 Cent, and it didn't like go far right off into.
When you threw the pitch, did you throw like from the mound or from in front of the mound though?
No, I threw from the mound, and I will say, there are a couple factors that
What's
I
a
wanted to discuss.
distance?
It is
It's a
definitely.
distance.
It's intimidating when you get out there.
No, it is. So a couple factors. One, once I got out to that mound, it was like, this is a lot further away than I remember. I will say that. But it was also during COVID, and we got one fellow glasses wearer here that I had to wear a mask when I was out on the mound. And the problem with that is that
the fogging.
It fogs up your glasses.
Oh,
so
with the glasses.
I will not say that was like a true excuse, but I will say it did get in my head a little bit.
Yeah, it hurts. Yeah,
I'm out here. It's far away. I haven't thrown a ball in like 5 years, and now my glasses are fogged up. And as far as the quality of the pitch goes, it was absolutely terrible. Like when you watch like celebrity pitches on Instagram and stuff, some of them like 50 Cent are absolutely ridiculous. Mine was more like a Travis Kelce one. I think I two-hopped it in, which is terrible. And my wife did capture it on video, but she has sworn that it will never see the light of day. So
oh my God,
no one's ever going to see it. But yeah, I do need a chance to redeem myself and defend my honor on that one. It was not one of my proudest moments.
All I'm thinking about right now is I know there's that famous clip they play every now and then on like MLB Network of like from the 01 World Series when President Bush threw out the first pitch at Yankee Stadium after 9/11. And he had a conversation with like Derek Jeter before the game, like, should I do it from the mound? Should I do it from in front of the mound? It's like, it's up to you, but whatever you do, don't bounce it. Because
No, I can speak to that. It doesn't feel good. You don't want to do that. Didn't he throw a good curveball in? Isn't that what he did?
He threw a real good. He threw a good pitch in it.
That's tough. I mean, I can't even imagine that would be so intimidating. I think a lot of people don't understand. Like, I mean, there's like thousands of people watching you. Right? And like, even if you had played baseball or not, I mean, it is a distance, but
it is. Last thing on that though, it kind of saved the day. They did let my daughter do one as well, who at the time was like 4 years old. So I absolutely botched it and embarrassed myself, but to kind of soften the experience, my 4-year-old daughter got to throw it out, which everyone thought was cute. So she kind of saved the day on that, and but it is something that I have to live with. That's for sure.
As long as she didn't throw it farther than you, I think you're still good.
No, it wasn't that bad. It was bad. It wasn't that bad.
All right. Well, let's talk some baseball. I mean, we are off. Spring is off and running. The Cubs are 6-0 to start spring training. And again, like spring training doesn't mean a lot. It doesn't mean everything. But I will say,
one of those has to come with an asterisk because it was against the White Sox. Sorry, Sox fans that are watching.
But that's an easy one, right? I mean,
right.
They're basically their major league team is fielding a AAA team anyway.
Right.
Exactly. But I will say this: the Dodgers are 1-5. I know I said that pre-show, so it might be our one shining moment over LA this year. It seems like Pagoda is favoring them to be the NL champions, with the Braves and Cubs kind of falling right behind there. But yeah, Mike, Mike, start us off, because I know like we haven't talked in a minute. It's been a couple weeks since we've been on a show, and since we talked about it, any thoughts, anything that you're seeing from spring training to start that's exciting you?
A couple individual performances. I mean, today, if you happen to catch the game at all, PCA really lit it up. He had a hit that he immediately followed up with a stolen base where he forced a bad throw to center field that he came around to score on. He's fully in full PCA form there. Have had some nice highlights from Gage Workman, a guy they've claimed off of the Tigers in the Rule 5 draft that could potentially work out to being a bench bat with them. Because, I mean, if they keep him, he has to stay on the Major League roster. And the Cubs do lack a lefty bench bat, so that may actually work out, well for him, just as a matter of circumstance. I guess the only other thing I would say is, seeing some of the prospects, one guy I had never heard of, but like seems really impressive and imposing is, did you see in the first game, this guy, Ivan Brethauer, a guy that like, I think was in single A last year, hit this huge home run against the Dodgers that everyone is raving about, saying that he looks exactly like Aaron Judge in.
Oh,
I don't want to get over my skis in it, but like this guy is like 6'6" and has like the same batting stance as him. So, possibly have something special with him. Pitching overall has looked pretty good. Got a solid outing from James and Tyon today. A couple days ago, Justin Steele looked really good, striking out 5. So
he had 5 and 2.
Yeah.
He was sharp.
We're off to a pretty good start, even though these games aren't the ones that matter. But would rather have them win them than lose them at this point.
True, and they are going to start having to ramp up soon because they literally have like 2 weeks before they start the official, regular season. 2 games. We said, it's such a weird start to the season, right? And there's spring training. There's a break in the middle where they're going to Tokyo. They got the 2 games against the Dodgers coming back home.
Right.
Coming back to Arizona to finish out spring training before starting the season. So it's going to be interesting because I feel like they have a different ramp up versus other teams at this point because they have 2 games really in the middle of this month that actually matter.
Yeah, exactly. And also too, they're going to play, I think, 2 random games against like one of the Japanese teams there, like the Hanshin Tigers, and one other team that is slipping my mind right now. That'll definitely be cool to see. I'm looking forward to it. It does definitely feel so weird to like have those 2 games and then like come back to games that don't really matter. But at the same time, like there's probably only like 5 or 6 games after that in spring training where you could tune up and like set the rotation appropriately to where you would want to have it set for when the regular season resumes in the games against the Diamondbacks.
Murphy, anything that you've seen from spring training that you're excited about to start?
I saw pretty much everything you guys talked about. I cannot remember the name of the Aaron Judge guy, but I did see that clip as well. And my first thought was, how have I not heard of this guy? That was insane.
I hadn't heard of him either. Ivan Breathauer sounds like some like guy that's playing for Team Russia in hockey. But
and he just absolutely crushed it. But no, actually today, my dad he has a little condo in Gilbert, Arizona, right by Mesa, and he was actually at the game today. Yeah, and I was texting with him before the game, and he's kind of a novice fan. He's like, anything I should be watching for? I looked at the lineup, and I was like, ooh, looks like you get to watch PCA play today, and I was explaining a little bit about him, and I was like, keep an eye on this guy because he doesn't do like spring training. When he's playing baseball, he is playing baseball like Pete Rose, like all in all the time. Right. He's got to go crazy. Yeah, and like 30 minutes later, he texts me, he goes, I just watched PCA steal second and then third and home on the same play.
Yep.
And I was like, that's freaking awesome, man. Yep.
He is, and I think it's funny. Like, I think what was it? Nico Horner was like on the broadcast over the weekend and was just saying like, this guy is like must-watch TV. Like this guy is just when he's playing, all eyes have to be on him. Whether you're on the field, you're in the crowd, like, it's not like when he's got an at bat or he's on base, like it's not the time to go get your beer and hot dog. Like you gotta be there to watch when this guy's like playing.
Exactly. He's a combination of 2 of my all-time favorite Cubs. I mean, he's got the flair and the fire of Javi Baez, but he plays like Kenny Lofton, who should absolutely be in the Hall of Fame, by the way. But he's kind of a perfect hybrid of those 2. And I mean, you just absolutely can't miss it. When he's up to bat, you got to stop what you're doing. You got to catch it.
Yeah. I mean, and we definitely have some PCA talk later in the show, but one thing I thought, and this is the next topic really kind of jumping in here. One thing that, and Mike and I, Murphy, to give you some context, Mike is he's the positive one between us 2. Mike is definitely the optimist Cubs fan. He tries to find the silver linings and things. And I love him for it because I think he kind of mellows me out a little bit because I'm very much the opposite where maybe I've been a fan longer, I've been alive longer, so maybe that's part of it where I've got 10 years on him where I've had so much jadedness and hate built up within me. But I want to talk through the Justin Tucker signing because when Alex Bregman was, in free agency, he was a free agent, and the Cubs were going through that process of like, and you kept hearing the rumors like the Cubs are in it. The Cubs are a surprise team. They're in it. I never felt like they truly were because I never felt like they were going to spend what they needed to spend to get him, like
Yep.
some of the other teams that maybe have been a little bit more desperate, like Boston, which we saw spent, you know, um, basically around the same amount of money, but 1 year less. And I was like, I knew it because Mike brought it up and said Justin Tucker is a name that if they don't sign
Yep.
Bregman could come up. And I said, I don't want 40-year-old Justin Tucker. Like, I'm sorry, I just don't. Like, I think there's some value he could bring here, but I don't know if it's at
Yeah.
the expense of losing somebody off the roster that is younger and has some
Mhm.
potential. And lo and behold, they signed Justin Tucker to a 1 year, $6 million deal. In my opinion, this feels very much like an Eric Hosmer deal, where
Yeah.
I've said this guy's going to be DFA'd by June. I just don't see
Yeah.
him being on the roster come end of the year, and it's a waste of $6 million that I think could have gone towards maybe like a Dylan Cease trade, which I know the Padres, probably backed out because they need the pitching depth as well. But at the time, but this came at the expense of Canario being DFA'd.
Yeah.
So, what are your guys' thoughts on this? Because I know, Mike, I know you were a fan of this. You thought that it was a good signing. There's some value there. I just don't see him playing a lot of in the field at this age. He played. I think Mike, you said he played like 16 games last year at third
Well,
base, and the rest was
he played
DH.
6 at third base. Did play. He did play.
6.
He did play about a decent amount at first too. I'll expand on that a little bit more with how I am a little more optimistic about him at first. But if you want to go ahead, Murphy, if you have any takes on the Justin Tucker signing and the Alexander Canario DFAing and eventual trade, go for it.
Yeah. So, I actually am a fan of the signing. And kind of like you guys were
Okay.
saying, I mentioned earlier, our president here, Jamie, he and I are really big Cubs fans, and we, spend all of our day talking whiskey, and then every now and
Yep.
then we'll sneak off and just kind of debrief on Cub stuff. And that was something the two of us had been talking about a while back as well, knowing that we kind of had holes at backup first and backup third. And that's a name that we floated. We also thought that, this whole time we're making a run at Bergman, we're like, I know everyone's saying that we're kind of the front runners for this. I don't see it happening, and obviously it didn't. So we kind of sniffed this one out as well. I actually do like it. It sucks that it comes at the expense of Canario, who I did really like, and I feel like he never
Yeah.
really got a shot. It is painful to see Canario go for cash considerations, which is a very frustrating thing for, I think, every Cubs fans. We're doing a lot of cash considerations right now. I do like the veteran leadership of having him on the team. Someone who has gotten it done before. Someone who I think can be a really good role model. Similar to like a David Ross situation.
Yep.
Back when we were in the World
That's
Series.
exactly who it reminds me of.
Yep. Yeah, someone who is basically a half and half player coach. Someone who's going to take the PCAs and the Shaws and kind of take them under their wing and just kind of help them build some confidence. So I like it for that purpose. It is a bummer that it comes at the expense of Canario, who I really did like, and yeah, that's where I stand on
it. I'll say this for Turner. So, one thing that drove me insane all of last season was the constant, it seemed to be sheltering of Michael Busch at first base when Craig would throw Patrick Wisdom at first base against lefties or have him pinch hit against lefties a lot, when I felt like Michael Busch could have held his own against lefties. And, look, maybe there's something I'm not seeing with it. Maybe Craig is like kind of picking his spots for Michael Busch to face lefties. But regardless, it's clear that like there are some spots where he would rather have a different option at first base than Michael Busch. And now that you have a right-handed option in Justin Turner, that's probably who it's going to be. And I think it is fine as a bench signing. I would have been really pissed off if it, and who knows, it may turn out to be this way, that they sign him with the motivation of signing him as an everyday third baseman. I would tend to think they're not. I tend to think that now that they missed out on Bregman, that they have Turner, they're going to have Matt Shaw to just have him up the entire year, throw him at third base, have him be the everyday third baseman, maybe get, John Birdie some starts there if he struggles at third base. But at the same time, like, if that's what Craig is comfortable with, like, to have an option at third base or have an option at first base that is a right-handed hitter that has a high on-base percentage, I guess I can roll with it. I will say that, like, as the headline shows, Canario for cash, did we even break even? In the days leading up to the Justin Turner signing, there were reports coming out of spring training that they were trying Alexander Canario at first base, trying to be basically the exact type of guy that I think they're depending on Justin Turner to be, a guy to back up Michael Busch at first base and be a right-handed option at first base in the spots where Craig would not want Busch to face a lefty. And I do wonder if they didn't really like what they saw from Canario at first base, if that's what their main focus was behind making this sort of move. It is a shame. I did really like Alexander Canario. Like, he seemingly hit really well, despite the fact that, like, he never got really any consistent playing time in his first few years in the big leagues. But, it was just kind of a matter of circumstance. Like, the only places in the field you can play him are left field and right field. You got left field locked down with Ian Happ. You got right field locked down with Kyle Tucker. Where else were you going to really put him at that point? The only way that he ever would have made this team is if he could have been exactly what they signed Justin Turner to be. And, they must not have really liked what they saw from him at first base.
Yeah. I think we kind of talked about it, like, text message, and I, we were both like, hey, let's say something for the show, because we always, Mike and I get pretty heated in text message, and not in a bad way. I mean, we're both
we're just
pretty
passionate.
Exactly. Yeah, we're both pretty passionate, and we understand where that passion's coming from. I think my thing with the Justin Turner signing, there's a couple things here. One, I think that it's more upsetting that they didn't go all in on Bregman when I think we're only getting 1 year of Kyle Tucker. Where it's like, we know that
Right.
Kyle Tucker's probably going to be here 1 year at this point. And if that's the case, like, then this is the year that you should go all in, and you should push all your chips in and try to, get into the playoffs, win this division where it's incredibly winnable right now. Milwaukee's taking a step back on paper. St. Louis is taking a step and a half, and
Right.
if they trade Arenado, they're going to be even worse. The Pirates are going to pirate. The Reds, I think the Reds are going to be a little sneaky, and I've talked to Mike about this
I
too.
believe that. I believe that too. They might be
I think
the
with
second best team in the division.
With Terry Francona coming in, he's got the track record to turn some of the teams like this around. He's done it in Cleveland. I think that
First year in Boston.
first year in Boston. This is a roster that is like his. This is his MO. He takes rosters like this and he turns them into winners. And so I think Cincinnati could be sneaky, but I still think this is a really winnable division. And to me, it's showing, like, if you're all in, like, I just don't get what they are. Like, are you all in? Or are you not? Like, because it seems like when you make a trade for Kyle Tucker, it looks like you're all in, because you've traded a couple prospect pieces for 1 year of a guy that you desperately need to make the playoffs at this point. And then they don't go all in on Bregman. They don't sign him. They settled for 1 year of Tucker at the expense of Canario, who's 25 years old, has only had a cup of coffee in the big leagues. There's guys like Vidal Brujan who are on the 40-man roster that I think that I would rather see off of the 40-man to save Canario. I don't get it. I don't understand the vision. It feels very all over the place. Like, it feels like a mixed bag of, like, what they're doing at this point. Like, are you in or you not, right? And I think that's where my problem with the Tucker signing is.
So my buddy and I were talking about that today, both the Bregman situation and the state of the NL Central. And much to your point, we started talking about how if you're gonna go all in on Tucker, what is the why wouldn't you also bring in Bregman? What's going on with that? That doesn't make sense. The only scenario where we thought that might make sense is if we are fully confident that we can win the NL Central as is, maybe we want to wait until the trade deadline when we know a little bit more about where we stand and invest our dollars at that point in time. It's not a strategy that I love, but maybe that was going through their heads, is that maybe instead of making the investment now, if we're confident we can take the division as is and have a good playoff run already, let's wait a few months, see where the market is, and maybe get some players at that point in time. That's the only thing we could come up with. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, at that point, it's like, who are you going after? I mean, are you going after Vlad? Are you going after Vlad? Because that's like, I don't know how many guys are on the last year of their contract going into contract years at this point that they would actually push their chips in for. And then, I mean, you're really starting to, at this point, like, it's such a gamble. I feel like it's not, where it's like, I feel like Bregman would have been the signing that says like, hey, we're here, we're going to win 90 plus games. And Pagoda's been very generous. I feel like we talked about on our last show, Pagoda's got the Cubs right around 90, 91 wins right now as is. And that was before the Justin Turner signing, which I don't think really moves the needle that much. I mean, probably about a half a game war at this point. But I still don't think that they've fully figured out, because I mean, what were the problems last year? It was third base, it was DH, it was catcher. I don't feel super confident that third base has really been solved yet, because Turner's 40 and Shaw is a what if. He's a prospect. And I think Shaw will do well.
I don't think Turner is going to see much playing time at third. I would hope at least.
I would hope not. I would hope not. But I mean but then at that point, you're really putting in a ton of confidence into Matt Shaw to say, like, you're an everyday third baseman. And if there's an injury, then you have Birdie, and then you have, Brujan as your backups, which are, 200 hitters. And, it doesn't give you a lot of, confidence in terms of depth when it comes to third base again. And we're right back to where we were last year.
We have a very attractive lottery ticket starting at third base, and then we have a lot of lottery tickets backing him up at third base, and it is concerning.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Right. And then I think, with catcher, I feel like Carson Kelly feels like the first year of Yan Gomes. Like, I think we'll probably get a decent year out of Carson Kelly, which I think defensively he's going to bring some stability that they needed from the catcher position and help them be, better defensively. I think the bat, I'm hoping is good enough. And because again, Amaya still a what if. Like, I think is Amaya the first half of 2024, or is he the second half of 2024? Which one is he, right? So you got to fix one of those spots. You got to fix the catcher spot or the third base spot, and I don't really think they did enough to fix either. So, the Kyle Tucker, to me, it's like, that gets you a few more games, wins above a replacement over Cody Bellinger. I would have liked to seen both of them in the lineup instead of one or the other, but yeah, I don't know. It's just the Tucker signing maybe feels to me more like maybe a domino effect of a lack of equity that Rickards has built with this team. Because, obviously I put here, did we break even yet? Did the Cubs hit, are we profitable yet? After the 500 million of revenue that they hit every year? I hope so. I really hope that Tom is, I hope he's not living on ramen. Like, I would feel awful if the man is living on ramen right now.
Yeah, and that so I was mentioning to you guys pre-show and to some people around here. I'm actually a pretty big Jed Hoyer fan. I think he's doing a pretty good job for the hand he's being dealt. I think that he's got a lot of restrictions that he's facing from the Ricketts, and I think that everything that we just talked about, the Tucker trade, things of that nature. I think there is a little bit of, all right, well, I got to do what I can to save my job, or at least build a resume. So I got to make a notable move here. And that's what he did. But it does seem a little haphazard when we're not willing to push the chips in at third base or other areas, catcher as well. And so I have a theory that Jed Hoyer is actually very good at his job, and he has a lot of restrictions being pushed down that he can't really acknowledge, which I think is really important.
So this is a Rick Hahn situation, is what you're saying, that he's handcuffed. Okay. Yeah, I know. And,
Yeah.
and we talked about a pre-show, he had some comments after the Bregman signing where
Yes.
it's not very common for a GM to come out and openly thank their owner for allowing them a little bit more payroll to go after a free agent when they haven't even hit the first level of luxury tax.
Right.
So,
And it still
and
wasn't even enough. And it still wasn't even enough to get him.
enough.
Right.
And again, this is, Jed came out and said, thank you to the Ricketts, for allowing me to have the opportunity to go after a player like, Bregman. And it was such a weird comment that I really felt like this is maybe Jed's way of slyly saying to the other owners in baseball, hey, if we don't make the playoffs and I'm not extended because this is the last year of Jed's contract, this is not on me. This is what I would have done had I not had those constraints, to Murphy's point. He would go out and sign a Bregman, but I'm handcuffed at this point. And it really felt like that. It felt like, hey, I'm handcuffed at this point, and thank you so much to my savior, Thomas Ricketts, for giving me the extra yen to go out and get, this prize free agent, even though it wasn't enough. It felt very much like it was like almost like an audition to some of the other owners in baseball.
I mean, let hold on. Let's pump the brakes on that for a second. I mean, I dislike the Ricketts constraints as much as the next guy, and like I have mixed feelings on Jed. I kind of feel like he's only really there because he was the next guy standing after Theo. I think he's done a pretty good job of building up the farm system for the Cubs, but you brought it up that you think that the Justin Turner signing could eventually become Eric Hosmer. Lest we forget that Jed had some absolute duds of signings in recent years with Eric Hosmer, Trey Mancini, Tucker Barnhart.
Yeah.
There are guys that added zero value to this team. That
it's the bargain bin. It's the bargain bin shopping.
That I mean, look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that like Ricketts should be complaining about the money he has to spend, but like I could see why he would have to be unhappy about cutting, Trey Mancini 1 year into a 2-year deal to because he's playing so poorly. And, then you have, I really feel like a big reason why they were able to get Cody Bellinger back at the price they did last season was because, after Trey Mancini and Eric Hosmer got cut, the majority of the reps at first base were given to Cody Bellinger, and that kind of lowered his value a little bit because he probably would have made a lot more money if he had played the whole year as an outfielder and maybe from another team as well too. So, it's not like Jed is without his flaws as well too here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And one thing I mean, for those of you watching and consistently watched us, I've been I've pushed back on the Jed love a little bit, and the reason being too is like, let's look at it this way: with Canario being DFA'd and sent for cash considerations from the Chris Bryant, the Javi Baez, the Anthony Rizzo trades, I think PCA and is it
Alcantara
are probably the only two left that are worth even mentioning because Caleb, Killian hasn't really amounted to anything at this point.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he will at this. I mean, what is that guy, like 26, 27 at this point? I don't even, I got to look that up. But, he's had a couple cups of coffee in the big leagues and is, completely bombed. So, and it looks like PCA is like the saving grace of like every piece that they had, right? And this is like my point too, where it's like, it's nice to have this pool of prospects, but they are prospects until proven players. And it's nice to build and have this like great farm system and have this number one farm system that you can, call up and trade from. But I feel like he's sold pretty low on some of these guys when he had an opportunity to sell a little bit higher, slept on. And now we're selling, guys like Canario for cash considerations instead of like, packaging them in a deal with like Owen Casey for something bigger, right? So,
right.
That's where I've had some reservations with Jed too, where I think he's held on a little bit too long to his, his capital, his prospect capital.
The thing I wonder about is like, did they really have to, the same day they signed Turner, did they really have to like make a move with Canario? Did they really have to like cut someone from the 40-man roster on that
I don't
same
know.
day? I would have thought that like the deadline for that would have been like, right before they play the Dodgers in Japan. But like,
Yeah,
what, like, you couldn't have really signed both and then like, try to work out a trade for Canario for possibly some
something,
kind of prospect. Yeah, exactly.
something,
Right?
like anything.
I also I think it's ridiculous that we just got cash considerations for him instead of getting some sort of a flyer prospect, low level prospect, whatever. I
Right.
think that's ridiculous, but I do wonder, and I wonder what you guys' thoughts are on this. Is if Jed knew that the writing was on the wall with Canario, that we weren't going to be able to keep him. Do you think there's any chance that he was kind of being Mr. Nice Guy and giving him time to catch on with another team while it's still spring training? Any chance that?
That's a good point.
Yeah,
that is. I mean, he wound up going to the Mets in a trade for cash considerations, and I wonder with them like what they plan for his role to be. I mean, obviously we know who's playing right field there in Queens, but
Yep.
is left field open for him? Because I wonder, like, with a guy who has had as impressive numbers as he has in the minors and has come up and done what he does here, like he's the kind of guy, and I talked with John about this, earlier this week, that like he could be really good, but he would have to play every day to do that. I don't know that he could have spent the entire year on the roster being in the same role again, we have to, we have to qualify this, that we assume that they're going to have Justin Tucker in for this season. Because if, I think if they felt that he was someone who could hit consistently well from a bench role or from a part-time player, that he would still be here, but that just isn't the case.
Yeah. Well, we were bringing up one of the prospects, I think, that was the prize from that 2021 sell-off, and that was PCA, and Murphy brought him up at the beginning of the show. I think one thing that we wanted to note was PCA's number is changing. This is also a
Right.
big reason why, man, it's really hard for me to want to buy any players' jerseys at this point. One, are they going to be here for long term? Two,
Right.
they're constantly changing their numbers, but
yeah.
I don't know. I kind of like the change to 4. I mean, with PCA, like, I wish his jersey just said PCA at this point, because I mean,
Yeah,
that's a jersey.
I'm with you on
That's
that.
that is a jersey that is so hard to buy, because I'm not a big dude. I wear size small right now. That name covers, like, from left love handle to right love handle. You know what I mean? Like, it goes all the way
Right.
around. And now there's a singular number, which makes it a little better, but
I was going to say, like, yeah, a single digit number is fitting for, a player who rounds their game out around speed. But like for a guy who has as long of a last name as he does, like having 2 kind of builds a little bit more of a balanced rainbow a little bit more, but to their own.
Yeah, I have the exact same concerns. I also have a kind of a slender body. I am absolutely getting a PCA jersey though this year. Getting the number 4 and hopefully in their powder blue alternates.
Oh yeah,
but,
Chicago Blues jerseys.
Yes,
those are really cool. But I love the number change, man. And I talk about this a lot with my Cubs friends. I'm a big 1990s baseball fan. I have not adjusted to modern day. For instance, I still think about batting average, which I know the rest of the world has left behind. I love the idea of your Kenny Lofton, your super fast, scrappy guy leading off. I have not adjusted to the world where guys like Kyle Schwarber are leading off for teams yet, and so I love I love PCA coming up, kind of a 1990s style player who could hopefully one day potentially be leading off center fielder, low number 4. I just think it's awesome. I'm pumped about it.
You're thinking of PCA as like a Lance Johnson type from like the '98
Yes,
Cubs.
that's
Yeah.
exactly right. Yep.
And I was gonna
Love
bring
Lance
that up.
Johnson.
I was gonna bring that up. So what is your, I guess what is your, because PCA number 4 feels like a speed guy number, right? It's like your leadoff hitter number,
Mhm.
your guy that gets on base and steals bases. What is your, I guess what's the number that y'all love for like the speedy guy on your team? Like the
Yeah.
actual number. Because for me it's 9. I'm gonna go number 9. I'm gonna go Reed Johnson. I'm gonna go Juan Pierre.
Okay.
I feel like that was like a solid number for a leadoff hitter, was number 9.
Nine does feel right, but the thing is, like, as the years went on, like we got Javier Baez, he wore number 9 and like
Oh
kind of
yeah, okay. Yeah, that's
redefined
fair.
it a little bit. I mean, he was also fast, but like his game
He
wasn't
was.
built on just getting on base. He was more of a power guy too. So
That's true.
Yeah,
But he
yeah,
did
that's
he did
tough.
the he did the swim moves, he made
that's
base
true.
running fun.
That guy,
He
He
did
did,
make base running fun and an art. It was an art form.
yeah.
that guy could run the bases like no one you've seen. Yeah, nine is tough for me too. I totally get where you're coming from. Reed Johnson's a good call there, but I think kind of Javi Baez. I also think Todd Hundley. I don't know why. I've always been
Oh God, I hate Todd Hundley.
See, I love
hate Todd Hundley so much.
My favorite player on the Cubs is almost always the Cubs catcher. I grew up like loving catchers, and for some reason, when I was way into the Cubs, he was a catcher. So by default, I really liked him. I like Scott Service, guys like that. But for
Okay.
my
I
fast
can do
number, I mean,
yeah.
for my fast number, I might go with 4. I mean, it's hard to pass up 1. 1 is just a traditional fast guy
Yeah,
number as
one
well.
feels,
But
yeah.
4 to me feels like PCA running the bases. That's where I stand on it.
Okay.
I think for me, I'm with Murphy. I'd go number 1. I mean, the first guy I think of when I think of fast guy on the Cubs is Tony Campana, and he wore number 1 in the years
Yep.
he was here. So I mean that would be a good one. I mean, I think number 1, number 2, probably number 7 as well. We mentioned Kenny Lofton earlier in the show. That's the number
Yeah,
he
Kenny
wore at
Lofton
the
was a good
Cubs.
one. Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah, any number that is single digit and like has kind of that straight line in it, like I think that works for a speedy guy.
Well, you've got Dansby Swanson currently at number 7 too. Not
That's right.
traditionally a
That's
speed
true.
guy. So uh yeah.
Another fast. Eric Young Senior. I think he was 7.
Oh
Ah,
yeah.
Eli. Yep.
I loved watching that guy in the base path as well. Yep.
That was a fun guy. Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Okay.
Definitely.
I like that. Yeah, I like number 4 for PCA. I think it's I like the single digit. It's got to be single digits though, right? Like I mean, I feel like when you've got a guy at top of the order, like it feels appropriate when you got a guy who's in single. I don't know why, but it just does. It
I'm
just
trying to
works.
think. I know recently Stroman wore number 0, and like he can't do anything on offense
Yeah,
because they
he
have
did.
a DH by the time he was here.
Yeah.
But like, is he
But
the only
wasn't he
one
like
that
Gold Glove caliber in the field too, though? So I mean,
he
he
was?
actually played like
That's true. I guess
he played almost like an infielder.
yeah. I mean, with the single digit numbers, I guess that's probably the trait you think of is either like great defense or speed, a lot of speed on the base pass. Cause like, as we're seeing now, it does fit with Dansby with the infield defense. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, one thing I wanted to bring up too, because man, it's a sad sight to see. We've got
Yeah.
our old friend Anthony Rizzo just still out there right now. Nobody fishing for a first baseman. And I think he's waiting, and I think, obviously a lot of things can happen in March, right? Where guys get hurt, there needs to be some, but man, this is really surprising to me that Anthony Rizzo's still out there. One, who do you think he'll end up signing with? 2, is this, would this be something that you would be open to a reunion in order to, head versus heart, right? Like, would you want to bring back Anthony Rizzo and have him end his career as a Cub, for the good all sake? Or are you at a point where you're just like, man, the Cubs just don't have roster spots to spare and they need to get better in different areas?
Man, if this was 2022 or maybe even 2023 when we didn't know that team would be somewhat competitive, I probably would have said yes, but like, the Cubs are at a point now where like they're division favorites. They're probably looking to make the playoffs this year. As much as I loved Anthony Rizzo when he was here, he was easily my favorite player on the 2016 team. I kind of don't see it for him. I really hate to say it, but like there's no room on the roster for him.
Yeah. You're taking head over heart. I like it.
Yeah.
I have a hard time doing that. I got to take heart over head. Like a standard Cubs fan would here. I think I would so love to see him back on a roster. He basically is the new Mr. Cub. But I think what it comes down to is if say Bush gets hurt or something, and we have determined that Turner is capable of playing third base, which I know is a big question mark and probably really unlikely. It seems like he's first base. If he's capable of playing third base though, and Bush gets hurt, I think you'd give it a good look at that point in time, right? So that would be really the only scenario where I think it probably makes a lot of sense. I also think it'd be pretty painful to sign him and just stash him on the bench. That seems almost mean to do. And then lastly, I mean, not only do we have a logjam on our current roster, but just with the number of prospects that we have kind of backing everyone up right now, it doesn't seem like it makes sense. I really, really wish that it did.
Like I would be more than happy if he decided like this was it. I'm going to retire. If he wanted to give the Cubs a call and say, listen, I want to retire as a Cub. This is where I spent the majority of my career. That's where I had my best years. Let me retire with you guys. I'm all on board with that, but the
old 10-day contract, like the NBA, 10-day contract.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, there's for sure got to be some kind of like, I think even, whenever he does retire, even if he doesn't do that, like, I feel like that's got to be the move. I mean, I feel like, at this point, Ricketts has to really do some big things to build equity with the fan base. I mean, it took, how many years to bring Sammy back to the Cubs. And, I think that would be a move that shows class to be like, hey, you need to retire a Cub and let's bring you back for a day, sign the contract, we'll pay you for the day, and then have this big Anthony Rizzo like bobblehead, jersey retire. I don't even know. Like, would you retire his jersey? I mean,
I would. He was the leader of the greatest Cubs team in modern history. Absolutely, I would.
Okay.
I think you have to as well. Yeah, I think you got to retire that.
Yeah, I would be for that. I think that's probably the lone Cub outside of Sammy Sosa that I would legitimately say that would be the next number that they should retire would be Anthony Rizzo.
Yeah. Maybe where you give him a look. I did this backwards. I was saying, if Bush goes down and Turner can play third, you give him a look. Well, what if say Turner goes down with an injury at some point and Birdie is mainly, focused on backing up third or rotating at third. Well, maybe give Rizzo a look at backing up 1B at that point. Maybe that's when you do it. Yeah. But,
or even, even Nico, we don't know what Nico's timeline is looking like right now, coming back from injury too, right? And you maybe have to move Bush over to second, and it creates a little.
I will say this. One area the Cubs are lacking in right now is they only have one lefty reliever in their bullpen right now, and we've seen Anthony Rizzo on the mound. He has a 0 career ERA. Maybe he's the missing piece in the bullpen.
That's my favorite. Do you guys ever do the Immaculate Grid? Immaculate Grid?
Yes, I love Immaculate Grid.
Oh man, real fun game, but that's my go-to. Pitched at least one game with less than 3 ERA. Anthony Rizzo every single time.
Yep,
I love that. Perfect. Yeah, and you know what? If it is good, if Pagoda's correct, and the Cubs do win 91 games and make it deep into the playoffs, and you have to face the Dodgers, who else would you want to face Freddie Freeman than Anthony Rizzo?
Exactly. There we go.
He's got it, right? He's got it.
Him the whole time.
He's done it. Yeah, Frederick.
Frederick.
Fred, if you're watching tape all night the night before.
I guess one last thought on Rizzo. Like the only potential landing spot, I feel like this is probably the best place for him to potentially go. He is originally from the Miami area. I want to say right now the Marlins' projected starter at first base is a guy who was previously a Cub, Matt Mervis. If they feel like that could be an upgrade for them, get get some of his family at the game every game. You know, they're looking for any reason to sell tickets. So that's like
true.
the one landing spot I think would work out well for him.
I like that. Yeah, I think that would be a good signing for them and probably a good move for him.
Yeah.
Well, beyond, obviously the Rizzo talk, and we don't know, right? I think there's a lot of things that could happen, a lot of injuries that could happen, it's baseball. Are there any moves that y'all want to see the Cubs do within the last month, right? Before the season starts? We've talked about on past shows, like, if they weren't going to sign Bregman, I would have loved to seen them push in their chips for like a Dylan Cease, bring him back to the organization, have that starting pitching. I don't think San Diego is going to do that at this point because I think they had a starting pitcher go down, I want to say, right recently. So I don't think that they're going to trade from their starting rotation at this point, even though they did sign, was it Pavetta?
Nick Pavetta,
recently,
Yep.
to a 4-year deal. So, but I do think that they signed him to a 4-year deal because they had somebody go down. So, beyond, is it a starter? Is it another bat? Like, where would you feel like, what is the one move where you would feel comfortable that if the Cubs made, you're like, okay, shirt out, there are no ifs, this is 100% in the bag, they're going to win the Central?
To kind of follow your point, I mean, I'll talk about somewhere where I wish we would have gone, and that's, I wish we'd have taken Belly's, the funds we recouped from that and invested that in some sort of an ace, whether it was through a trade or through free agency, gotten an ace. I feel like we've got a lot of really good two pitchers, like high end two pitchers. What we're missing is kind of our Arrieta, the guy who's going to go out and win 15 to 18 games, just a lockdown guy. And I know at this point that's not really out there, unless somehow the Cease thing, presents itself again. So I'm not sure that they're really, without injury, I'm not sure that there is anything left out there for us that I think makes a ton of sense, unless it has something to do with just a little assurance at third base. But I'm generally a believer in Shaw. So I think that as far as my opinion goes, I think we're pretty well put. I wish we would have gotten one more ace, and that's about it. But I look forward to hearing what you guys think on it.
Yeah, I love that you said that because Mike and I have that conversation a lot. I think we've had that argument. We had that argument all of last year, by the way. That I said the Cubs never had an ace. They had a bunch of number 2 starters. And, I think to Mike's point, Imanaga was somebody that at the beginning of the year, to Mike's credit, he did say that he felt Imanaga could be a potential ace. And I will always give him his kudos because not a firm believer in Imanaga right off the bat because I think making that switch to the States, can be challenging, and I think having his interpreter, having, Suzuki helps, I think having the infrastructure that the Cubs have for Japanese players helps. But, I was always on that line of there's no surefire, man, if it's, game 1 or game 7 of the World Series, you want to start or end that World Series, you need a fireballer. I want somebody that throws, 97 to 100 miles per hour. They're not going to rely on the defense because those are going to be the fuckers that get everybody out, striking guys out. And I still don't think they have that, and so I agree. They have a lot of nice number 2 starters that are kind of borderline, but I would have loved to see that sign, trade, something like that.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm not in disagreement with you. I definitely would have liked to have seen Dylan Cease added to this rotation because, quite frankly, if you add him, I think, there's not a better top 3 in baseball if you had Cease, Steele, Imanaga as your top 3. Again, looks like those talks have kind of died down. Padres are going to stick with it. We'll see what it's like at the deadline. Look, I feel like they do have, I don't know which one it is between Steele or Imanaga. I feel like they do have an ace caliber pitcher in one of those. I feel like a fully healthy season of Justin Steele, he can give you what he gave you in 2023, where he finished top 5 in Cy Young, where he looked like, arguably the Cy Young favorite until, middle of September. I got full faith in Justin Steele. I do think there's probably going to be some regression with Shota Imanaga this year because, he got really lucky with a lot of the games where he got a lot of fly ball outs, and then on games where the weather would be a little more favorable, those balls probably would have went out, and we did see that in some games where he did get lit up. Like the games where he got hit really, really hard.
Yeah. And I told you that. I mean, he's a fly ball pitcher at Wrigley, where it's like those games are going to happen, and that was the
Sure.
concern with me is like with Imanaga is like he definitely has. I love the 5 to 6 pitch arsenal. I think we saw a lot of that with you, Darvish. But the difference was that you, Darvish, had a 96, 97 mile per hour fastball, where Imanaga has to, really rely like on his pitch mix, changing speeds, location, and hope that he doesn't give up those fly balls into the bleachers, come summertime.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. We'll see. There's a possibility where the weather favors him again this year. We talked about it last show that Jed made the comment about the weather not favoring the hitters. Well, if it favors the hitters this year, it's probably not going to favor the pitchers. So, and it's not something you can control either. I'd rather it favor the pitchers, honestly, because you can control that better. As far as any sort of moves that I think the Cubs can make that's remaining out there, I'm someone who, as long as the show has existed, has been harping on the fact that the Cubs have lacked a really good left-handed reliever, especially in a division that has a lot of good lefty hitters on, the Brewers and the Reds and the Cardinals. And the guy that I would really like to go out there and get, and he's a former Cub and has done well.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
I want the sheriff back. Sheriff,
I'm all about it. All about it.
Yeah.
I agree. Bring the stash back, man.
Yeah, that guy was nails for that first half of 2021 when he was here, and has continued to be that in Detroit and
pretty
Oakland.
Good pitcher.
Yeah. So I mean, that's probably the one area of need that they still have. So if they can get Andrew Chafin, I'm feeling really good about this team.
Okay, I love that. I mean, it's right on topic with our last thing before we kind of maybe pick some division winners here, but I think the bullpen has been a question. It was the question mark in 2024. They helped solidify it, in the offseason with the trade for Ryan Presley. And Mike and I have talked about, some internal options. Last show we talked about, Luke Little, Porter Hodge. I know we know that Presley's most likely going to be the closer to start the season. Do you think he's going to be the closer to end the season, though?
I'll chime in real quick. I mean, that one's tough. I am really pumped about Presley. I think that was an awesome signing. With that being said, I'm a huge Porter Hodge fan, so it's really tough for me to make that assumption. I really hope that they both kill it this year. Last year, I think that was kind of our Achilles heel was bullpen issues. And that's one reason, by the way, why I am okay how we haven't necessarily gone all in on offensive players. We've done some good corrections in our bullpen, and that's where we needed to address the most, in my opinion. So that's exciting. I like to think that at some point, Presley and Hodge are 8-9 lockdown, every single time. I'm just not sure which one's going first, which one's going second. I will throw out one more though, and that's I really, really want to see Ben Brown remain in the rotation, but in the event that he gets moved to the bullpen, I do think eventually he could be a really good closer. Yeah,
he's got the stuff for it. He definitely has the arsenal. But I agree. I think I would hope. I feel like Ben Brown, if developed properly and stretched out, and going on the 4 or 5 days rest like every starter. And if he could stay healthy, man, I feel like that guy has like ace potential.
Yes.
Yeah. He's the guy that he's young. He's got, the crazy heater, the wipeout stuff. Yep. man,
He kind of takes me back to like the Kerry Wood, Mark Pryor days. When we had these
yeah,
monster
yep.
pitchers coming up, and
Yeah.
last year after his first game out there, I was like, oh man, that's what this guy is. And then obviously had some neck issues and never really got to spend a lot of time back out there, at least as a starter. So I really hope he gets another shot at that, because I think he could be something.
Okay, I like that.
I wouldn't mind seeing Ben Brown out there. I just think that with the Ryan Presley signing, that like they really wanted to get someone that's a veteran for that role after going into last year, sticking with Adbert after the hot 2023 that he had and not having it work out as they thought it would. I think they wanted someone to stick there that's proven. As we discussed, it'll be Presley to start. We'll see as the year goes on, because his stuff, I would imagine, still pretty good. Like if you look at his splits last year, he had like a little bit of a rough patch in like April, May, and then like June through the rest of the year with the Astros was really, really good. I'm going to keep my faith in Ryan Presley and say that he stays the closer the whole year.
He did struggle. I think it was the first month of the year. And we talked about it. I think he finished the year with like a sub 1 or sub 2, at least a sub 2 ERA after he settled into that 8th inning role, the setup guy role.
Yeah.
And he did have back-to-back seasons where he had 30 plus saves. Man, it just, you know how I feel, Mike. I want that fireballer back there. I want that guy that throws heat. And my guy, I'm gonna say the way that Porter Hodge finished last year, if he can stay healthy, I think that guy has the stuff to be like your closer of the future.
I hope so. I'll just say this. I'm glad they have Presley now. I'm glad they have Presley.
Oh yeah, it stabilizes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm glad that they are going into this year with a much more solid backup plan than what you had with Hector Neris last season. That you have a guy who has like long time closing experience.
Ooh, Hector Neris, that hits a sore spot with me every time I hear that name. It's like,
that was a tough
I believe
it.
I get like, I almost kind of like, got acid reflux every time you kind of mention that name. All right.
Heart attack Hector.
All right. Well, heart attack Hector. There you go. But it was more acid reflux, like Neris for me.
Right.
Nauseous Neris. That was more of it.
There we go. There we go.
Nauseous Neris.
I'm gonna go with I think like I agree. I like the Ryan Presley signing for the fact that I think it allows Porter to be groomed more into that role. But I'm gonna call it right now. I think that's your closer by the end of the year.
I love it.
I'm gonna call it right now. That's gonna be my hot take
right.
for the spring.
I just hope that if that's the case, it's because Porter Hodge is doing so well, they have to put him there.
Yes, yeah,
and not and not for any other reason.
True, for sure. Okay, let's have some fun. Let's pick some division winners here. So I'm going to pull up the screen here. I'm going to share the division winners for 2024, and that way you could see the teams. And then we'll just go division by division and share who we think is going to win. So let's start with the AL East.
Okay.
Let me make this a little bit bigger. So you got the Yankees, you got the Orioles, Red Sox obviously made the move for Alex Bregman. Tampa Bay, always conserving, capital at this point.
Right.
Toronto, the biggest what if winner of free agency, like they're always in it towards the end, but they're the bridesmaid, never the bride. So who you got in the AL Central? Mike, I'll start with you.
The AL Central or AL East?
AL East. I'm sorry, AL East. Sorry.
You're
AL
good.
East.
You're good.
You got.
I'm pretty confident that I think top 3 will remain the same. I think Red Sox will maybe jump the Orioles, but at this point, I'm sticking with the Yankees as the AL East winner. They have a good off season. They did lose Juan Soto, but gained Cody Bellinger from us. Did get a solid closer in Devin Williams from the Brewers. It could potentially be the Orioles too. They had a little bit of a disappointing year last year, but I'm feeling a little more confident with the Yankees winning the AL East.
Okay.
I'll go with the same. For pretty much the same reasons. I got to stick with the Yankees. I like the additions they did at closer. Beller's not exactly a perfect offset to Soto, but I think it's a nice recovery from it. I think the Yankees remain on top.
Yeah, I agree. I think Bellinger is going to have a bigger year in New York than he did with the Cubs. I think that short porch is going to be very favorable. We saw that with Anthony Rizzo when he was traded to the Yankees.
Yep.
He had a jump in power, so I think you're probably going to see a 30 plus home run season from Cody Bellinger with that short porch. I think Baltimore obviously losing Corbin Burns, their rotation took a step back.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, Boston obviously, made the Bregman trade. I think that was a nice addition. But I don't think it's going to be enough to jump Baltimore. I think they're going to finish exactly the same that they did last year. So I'm gonna pick the Yankees. So we got the Yankees there unanimously.
For sure.
All right. AL Central last year was the Guardians with Kansas City making a really surprise run. I think Detroit was my projected winner in 2024.
That was mine as well
when
too.
we picked winners. So, and then we've got the Twins, and I don't know who that team is from the other side, but who is that there? Is that the Barons, the Birmingham Barons?
The Charlotte
Right.
Knights, yeah, exactly.
Charlotte Knights. Oh, you were nicer. You went AAA. Okay,
Right.
I went double. All right. So who do you got? AL Central. Who you got, Mike?
This one, it's weird. I feel like the Guardians are still probably about as good as they were last season, but I think I picked them last year, and I feel some good about what's going on in Detroit. Like, they got the AL Cy Young winner in Tarek Skubal. They added Jack Flaherty back to their rotation again. There's some good young talent there with Riley Green and Colt Keith. So I'm going Detroit to win the AL Central.
All right. Well, I got to go with the White Sox. No, I'm totally kidding. But the AL Central is kind of interesting because it's a total crapshoot in my opinion. And the teams that I view here, I mean, I'm talking Twins, Tigers, Royals, Guardians, all of them. Somehow they always kind of remind me of like the Cardinals from like 5 to 10 years ago, where on paper none of them are like really that outstanding, but somehow they get a team that really plays together, and any one of them could get it done. I don't really know why, but I'd probably take a flyer on the Royals this year. I just
wow.
They got some good young talent. I don't know. Maybe they'll put it together.
They probably have the best individual player in this division in Bobby Witt.
Yeah.
So he
he
could potentially carry them.
Yeah,
he's a stud, man. I'm going to stick true to my pick last year. I felt really confident picking the Tigers last year, and they didn't get off to the best start, but they made a run at the end, and they got into the wild card, and they looked really solid. I think adding AJ Hinch, as their manager, I think that could be the push. That they when was he this year? I can't remember when he took over as manager. Was it last year or this year?
Last year.
Was it last year? Yeah, last year. So I think having a full year of AJ Hinch is going to be beneficial. Like you said, you had some Cy Young candidates on, with the Detroit. I'm gonna go Detroit. I'm gonna stay true. I think Detroit is going to be. I think they're going to be a lot better. I think they won 86 games last year, right? I think they're going to be 90 plus win team. I think with having the Twins in Chicago in that division, I think you could beat up on a lot of bad baseball.
Sure.
So
are we sleeping on Cleveland at all? Like I don't know.
I think Cleveland's going to take a step back, and I think Cleveland does a wonderful job of developing pitching, and that's always going to keep them, in contention and winning ball games. But I think the Tigers take a jump this year. I do.
Okay.
All right. AL West. You've got last year the Houston Astros started atrociously to start the year. And I think a lot of us were counting them out pretty early, and at that time I think they had like 5 starters on the IL to start the year.
They got swept at Wrigley in April. I remember I was at the last game of that series.
Yeah, they were really bad to start the year, and they did have a lot of injuries early on. They came back strong. They ended up winning, they ended up winning the division. They did lose Kyle Tucker. They did lose Alex Bregman. They did gain, who was it? No one? So,
Well,
uh,
you could. There is a world where, you know, when the Cubs traded for Isak Paredes, I remember the whole narrative
yeah,
around him was that he, you know, like he was someone who was kind of like a merchant for Tropicana Field because it was like the shortest distance down the left field line. Now he
okay,
has
yeah,
he has a favorable short left field for him with Crawford boxes down in Houston again. That said, I don't know if you've seen like their defensive alignment at all lately. I think they're going to have him play at second base, and they're going to have Jose Altuve in left field.
wow,
It's gonna be weird for them this year. Um,
okay, yeah,
yeah, probably a step back for them. I think a huge step forward will be with the Seattle Mariners. They had probably the best pitching rotation in baseball last year of any
Mhm.
team that didn't make the
hmm,
playoffs. They just didn't really have that strong a hitting, but Julio Rodriguez is kind of an MVP caliber player that could take that next step and kind of carry them. So I'm going to go with Seattle.
okay,
Yeah. I'm gonna
like
pretty
that.
much follow suit. I'm gonna pretty much follow suit on this one. The Astros lost just so much talent. Gained some back, obviously, but I'm gonna take them out of it, and I'll probably go with the Mariners here too. Like you said, the rotation's incredible. Got some good young guys. I don't, and I could be wrong in this. I don't know that they added much in the offseason, did they? But
I don't
so I
think
mean,
so.
maybe that's a bit of a miss there. But I think that if I had to pick one, I'd go Mariners.
Okay, I think, man, it was really hard for me. Is it the move from Oakland that can help the Athletics, or was it the signing of Kyle Hendricks that can help the Angels?
Hey,
No, I'm just I'm kidding.
don't forget about the signing of Tim
Oh,
Anderson for
here.
the Angels as well too.
Oh, yeah. And where didn't Soler go to the Angels too?
He did, yes.
Yeah.
It's
So
like
they're just signing
all those
uh,
Chicago baseball
the
castoffs.
Chicago. All right. So I'm going with the Chicago Angels as my AL West team. No, you know, man, I think with it's tough. I'm having a hard time because I think Texas took like such a big step back. They had a lot of injuries. They definitely have the payroll to support, a winning team. Um, and between Texas and Seattle here, uh, I think for the reasons that you all said, I'm probably going to lean towards Seattle as well. I think the rotation alone, I think, is going to help carry the Mariners. And I was concerned that they were probably going to trade from some of that, that depth that they had, and they didn't end up doing any of that. So yeah, I'm gonna stick with Seattle. I'm gonna agree with y'all. I think we're unanimous there. I think Seattle is going to be the division winner for the AL West. All right.
All righty.
Now we're on to the NL. We'll save the Central for last because I think, like,
Okay.
we're a Cubs show. So, um, NL East, we've got, the Phillies, and I'm gonna puff my chest here. I said the Phillies would win the NL East at the beginning of last year.
You did.
I also
Congrats.
had them as the World Series representative, which they were not, but um, they did, they did push the envelope there. Um, so we've got the Phillies who won 95 games. They obviously have the huge, inflated payroll as well. You've got the Atlanta Braves that you're getting back, some health with, Ozuna, or Acuna. I'm
Acuna.
sorry,
Yep.
Acuna is coming back from injury. You've got the Mets who have the biggest addition in baseball this past offseason with Juan Soto. The Nationals, I think, who are just obviously still in rebuild, and the Miami Marlins, who are just trash. So I think we can agree they'll finish last. But
Right.
who you got in the NL East?
This is such a tough one because like the Mets were the team that made the biggest move of the offseason, and they were a team that
Mhm.
like made a really deep playoff run.
They
You
did.
look at you look at their roster though, and it's like they don't really have much as far as pitching goes, and you know who knows what scrubs are going to be filling out the rest of that lineup really. You know, I they weren't really a team we took seriously to start last season, so you know, maybe we should take them a little more seriously with, you know, arguably the best hitter in baseball on their team now. That being said, I think with, you know, as you mentioned, the bounce back for Acuna and another year of Chris Sale coming off winning the Cy Young Award, I'm going with Atlanta to win the NL East.
Okay. Like that.
Yeah, I like that. Man, this one's just a monster. I mean, out of the Phillies, Braves, Mets, I mean, I think two of them are going to be just absolutely killer, and I think there will probably be one that flops there. The hard part is picking out which one's which. It could be any of them. I'll probably go with the Phillies. Man, their offense is just crazy. Love seeing Kyle Schwarber play. Big Kyle Schwarber fan. So yeah, I gotta give a very, very slight nod to them. Braves, Mets, somewhere very close second. It's going to be tough, but I'll go Philly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm actually, you know, I think with the healthy Acuna, you know, and I think with the Braves rotation, you know, and they did lose was Max Fried in the offseason too.
Yeah, he's on the Yankees now. Yep.
He's on the Yankees now. I don't know. I feel like they always have the ability to develop some great arms too within their system. I think, man, it's hard to stray away from the Phillies because I did that last year. You know, I went all in on Philadelphia, and you know, like I said, I'm going to puff my chest because I think on our last show, everyone picked Atlanta, and I was the only one who picked Philadelphia. I think I'm going to flip flop them this year. I think I'm going to go with Atlanta. I think Atlanta, you know, with full health, will probably with that rotation. I think that lineup. I mean, that was it the 1 year. What was it? 2 years ago when they had like I feel like every guy in that lineup had like 40 plus home runs. You had like you know Murphy, you had Acuna, you had isn't like freaking everybody had like 40 home runs. So I'm gonna go with the Braves. I'm gonna stick with the Braves for this one. I'm gonna flip flop from last year.
That works.
Okay. Before we get to the Central, let's do the NL West, which I feel like we don't have to take a lot of time on.
Yeah. This is the division. I mean, I guess you could say maybe the NL Central too. This is the one that kind of like disappoints me the most because the Padres in the playoffs last year were the team that kind of gave like the toughest battle to the Dodgers. And I know there are extenuating circumstances that have to do with like why they weren't a big player in free agency this offseason with, you know, the whole situation with their ownership group and, you know, the family of Peter Seidler trying to sort that all out and everything. Yep. You know, I'm looking for any reason to not pick the Dodgers here. Like the Diamondbacks getting, you know, Corbin Burns was pretty big for them, but they also lose Christian Walker in free agency to the Astros. So, I mean, I hate to say it, it's probably the most chalk pick we'll make, but I think we're all in agreement on the Dodgers winning the NL West here.
Yeah, obviously going with Dodgers here. The only thing I'll say is I look forward to the 1 month period where for some reason the rails fall off and everyone panics for a quick second. Obviously they're going to recover and win, but there is going to be, because it's baseball and it happens, there's going to be a quick spell where they're falling apart, and I'm really excited to watch that. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it was the Cubs 2016 year. You know, it was the month before the All-Star break where the Cubs were, you know,
they
5
and 15
like sub 500.
Yep.
Yeah, and they were just like everyone panicked, and they were still the best team of it. Yeah, Dodgers. I mean, hands down, they did the most in the offseason. And I've said it on our shows, man. I'm a big fan of what LA is doing. They are taking full advantage of, you know, the system that is created by baseball. Like, unless baseball wants to create a salary cap, this is on owners. I mean, this is really like, this is up to the owners. Like, if you want to spend or not, you can't complain, you know, that the Dodgers are going out and buying everybody if you're not going to have the same level of competitiveness. And if you're not, then maybe you shouldn't own a baseball team. You shouldn't. You shouldn't be part of the part of the game. Because I mean, we did this. We've done this before. We did this in the '90s with the Yankees. You know, this isn't new. This is, you know, the money's more, but
yeah, I think that's so well said, man. It's so painful to watch them do this, but it's mainly painful because we're fans of a club that won't play the game that they're playing, and so
100%.
that's the big problem with it. You know, if
Yep.
I'm in their shoes, I'm doing the exact same thing. It's
Yep.
very fortunate that they have an owner and a front office that are both willing to push the chips and put them on the table.
Yep.
Yeah, it is very hard and frustrating to watch, but it's only out of jealousy. And like I said, I'd be doing the same thing if I were them.
Yep. And you know what? They'll pay the piper in 2060 when they have to pay all those deferrals. So,
Yeah.
all right. NL Central. I feel like this, I'm hoping, would be easy for all of us too.
I'm wondering in what way would it be easy? I mean,
Start us off.
we like, I think last year we both picked the Cubs to win the NL Central, and obviously that
We
didn't go
did.
very well for us.
You're very wrong.
We were. But regardless of what we think about how long he is going to remain a Cub, I think at this point we can pretty safely say that Kyle Tucker is the best position player in the NL Central. I think
Yep.
we're pretty confident in the Cubs having maybe, I'd say, a top 2 rotation in the division and probably the best bullpen in the division.
Yeah.
The only rotation I'd put ahead of them is probably the Pirates, but you can't really depend on the Pirates to be competitive. I mean, they're full of flaws, but I got to stick with it. Cubs.
Okay.
Cubs to win the NL Central.
Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
this one's a tough one. Obviously, we're all Cubs fans here. I am going to go with the Cubs. I somehow the freaking Brewers they just kind of figure out how to put a sneaky team together and they sneak up on us, and I am a little nervous that something like that's going to happen again. I don't see it out of the Reds. The Cardinals this year, I don't see it out of them. The Pirates, their rotation's incredible. Man, really good rotation. I don't see them putting it together this year either. So I feel very confident in our chances. With that being said, just like you guys were touching on, I was very confident last year. As a matter of fact, quick rabbit hole on that. Last year, I made a little parlay. I always like to do a couple parlays going into the season to make the season really fun. And I put $100 on a 4-way parlay. Scotty Scheffler winning the Masters.
Nice.
UConn winning the NCAA men's tournament.
Okay.
Iowa women's basketball making the Elite Eight, which they went to the championship.
Oh man! Nice.
And then Cubs winning the NL Central. And I bet $100 to win $8,500. And so it was a very fun season for me to watch until the very end when we came up short. But after I got the first 3 out of the way, I was like, the Cubs are clearly going to win the Central this year, and I was overly confident, and it caught up with me. So I'm hoping this year, we can kind of redeem ourselves. I do think our chances this year are even better than last year. I don't think it's an overly competitive division. Yeah, I think that we've got this one.
Yeah. Last year when we picked division winners, I begrudgingly picked the Cubs to win the division. I was very down on the Cubs in the offseason last year. I felt like going into the season, I felt like the Brewers, their starting rotation was stronger at that point. And going into this year, I feel like I've been pretty good with the Cubs with head over heart, and Mike will probably attest. I'm probably a little bit tougher on my own team than probably most when it comes to this. But I think on paper, looking at the roster, I think it's more of the NL Central coming back down to earth. And we saw 3 teams that really fought towards the end, and then everyone buckled at the end, right? Like this division looked a lot better going into the playoffs last year, and then really buckled once they kind of got in. I think there are going to be teams that take steps back, and yeah, I think honestly the way that it's going to play out, I think you're probably going to see Milwaukee and Cincinnati battle for that second spot. I know we've talked about the Pirates rotation, but I'm going to throw out this fun fact. Do you know the last year that the Pirates signed a multi-year free agent. When was the last time the Pirates signed somebody to a multi-year deal?
So
A free agent, not
so
somebody
not extensions,
Okay.
not extensions.
not extensions, a free agent.
I was gonna say Mitch. Yeah, okay.
I'm trying to think of like who. Like I'm trying to think of like who on those like 2013, 14, 15 teams did they get free via free agency, and like nobody's really coming to mind. I don't know.
The last time they signed a multi-year free agent, somebody to more than a 1-year deal, like an actual free agent, not an extension, was 2016. They
Really?
signed.
That's more
they
recent than
signed-
I would have thought.
That is
Yeah.
Ivan Nova to a 3-year,
Wow.
$26 million deal. That is why I will never worry about the Pirates.
100%.
So they don't. I'm not worried about them. But
Yeah.
all
Why
right,
can they grow pitchers though, man? Yeah, they can grow pitchers.
They can, but they can grow pitchers for the Dodgers.
Yeah, exactly right.
They grow job future Dodgers. Is what they're really good at.
The thing I wonder about the Pirates is that I don't know if you guys would remember this, but in 2016 they were like kind of like in the mix for a wild card spot, like going down to the trade deadline.
Close, yeah.
And not at the end of the season. They decided to sell because of like kind of all the PTSD they had built up from the previous years where they had made wild card games and had their season end in just a 1-game playoff. And I do kind of wonder, like, if guys like Skeens and Jared Jones and Mitch Keller and, Brian Reynolds, they take that next big step this year and they actually are somewhat competitive. Like, do they actually placate their fans a little bit and try and like buy, even if it is at the risk of like having their season end after 2 games of the playoffs? I mean, I don't think they're a playoff caliber team now. I don't see them
I'm not worried
being that right now, but like it is something I kind of wonder about after such a long time from them being out of the playoffs.
Yeah,
I think they'd have to with their history. If they even sniff a chance, they have to do something. They have to go all in somehow. The question would be, what does all in look like to their organization? But
I lived in Pittsburgh for 5 years, and that was during the years that Pittsburgh had they had Liriano, they had they had a strong pitching pitching
Cole.
staff. They had Garrett Cole, they had AJ Burnett.
Right.
They had some solid guys, and even then, their owner is just so unwilling to spend and to do anything. And I've lived there. I've sat with their fans. Their fans understand fully that their owner might be worse than Reinsdorf, and that is saying a lot. So
High bar to clear.
It is a high bar.
Reinsdorf may be on his way out. If you
I saw that. Yeah. I did see that. Well, that was I know it's part of our next segment. So, well, at least on my end. But let's talk some flying the W's, taking the L's. Let's do that.
Hello, you play to win the game.
Addison is next. Doors open on the left at Addison.
I say one thing. Go. Let's go. That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
Is a L7 winning.
Winning. All right. So, Murphy, this is where we kind of just call out our winners and losers of of the week, or
since we last recorded. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Mike, you got anybody lined up? I've got a couple. So.
Yeah, I got one of each. I'll go with my W being, not a team that I think we're all on board of rooting for, but one thing that is a policy that's been going on for many, many years that's now been dropped. W going to New York Yankees players finally being able to grow facial hair now. They finally, after all these decades, dropped their stupid no facial hair policy. So congratulations to them. I don't know if you happen to see too, Derek Jeter posted something pretty funny on Instagram of like
a
Photoshop picture of him as a Yankee player with a beard. I found that to be pretty funny. So
okay, I like that.
Yeah.
All right. I like that W. Um, my W actually, I mean, you stole my thunder. It was it's White Sox fans, with the news that they could potentially be the team could be sold to Justin Ishbia or Ishbia. I don't know how to pronounce it, but
Ishbia, I think. Yeah.
Ishbia. Yeah. Um, I mean, God, I feel like at this point, like as a Chicago fan, anybody who is a billionaire that wants to buy our team and actually put some money into a team, like that gives some hope. I think we saw, I hate to say it, but we saw, rest in peace, Virginia McCaskey pass, and I think we saw a lot of talk about the Bears, basically having to, maybe split up some of the ownership across the family, and maybe that they would look to sell. So, and
Right.
and Jeff Bezos came to mind. That's somebody that we're like, ooh, that could be interesting. So, at least I'm going to give the W to Sox fans as they have maybe some hope. Maybe it's not real. Maybe it doesn't amount to anything or fully cement. But I'm going to say that W to Sox fans for having some hope that maybe Reinsdorf does sell.
Right.
Murphy, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you got anybody that you want to give a
No,
W
yeah.
to.
I mean, I'll give a nice, easy one out there. I'll give a W to the people down in Mesa, Arizona. I know that the games don't really matter, but watching the Cubs win games while sitting in nice weather, drinking beer sounds nice. They're getting to see, obviously, PCA do some crazy stuff out there. The Jaguars tearing it up. Getting to watch these young guys actually play down there. It's not 10 degrees and snowy like it is here. So I got to give a big W to people down there.
You guys ever been down there for spring training at all?
Oh yeah. So like I said, my parents have a spot down there, and so I go down usually every spring training. This year sounds like I'm going to miss it, which is unfortunate, but love it down there.
Yeah. I went 2017, the year after the Cubs won the World Series. I went down with my brother.
Nice.
We flew in on Spirit Airlines, which holy shit, I will never do again. I mean, especially knowing like all the stuff that's going on with airplanes in the last 6 months now.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
I will never do Spirits again. But we went down literally for like a day and a half. We stayed in like some shitty hotel just so we could be there. We were there when Joe Madden was doing like they were all shaving their heads for like cancer.
Oh, right, the St. Baldrick.
It was cool. St. Baldrick's. Yeah, it was super cool. We were there for that. I mean, we sat out there. It was 86 degrees, and they put on the scoreboard. Mesa, Scottsdale, 86 degrees. Chicago, 26 degrees, and I was like, I came back with sunburn. I was so burnt from sitting. We sat out like on the grass, like in the outfield.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, I got so burnt. It was awesome though. I definitely got to get back. I got to get back for sure.
Nice.
All right.
That's awesome.
Who you got for your L's? Mike, I'll start off with you and then I'll jump in.
I only got one. Keep it short and sweet. A guy who once torched the Bears in a playoff game for the Carolina Panthers, Steve Smith. In some very hot water these days for going outside of his marriage for a little bit of fun and getting called out by that husband of the woman that he was messing around with. So big L to Steve Smith.
Oh, I love that. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if I can top that, but I'm gonna stay on brand because I feel like I do a pretty good job of staying on brand. It's either Tom Ricketts, it's Aaron Rodgers, or it's the Packers in some fashion. So I'm gonna give my L to the Packers for this one because if anybody has seen in the news, they are leading the charge in trying to ban the Philadelphia tush push in the NFL. So. They are not a fan of the Eagles tush push because it has not been able to been stopped. You can't stop it if you do it correctly. And they are trying to ban it right now. And I think it's been really funny to watch teams just openly talk about a tush push now. So they love tushies, right? So Packers fans and Packers as an organization. All right, Murphy, who you got?
Can't say I disagree.
Yeah, the tush push situation is a lot like the Dodgers. It's like, they're just playing the game within the rules. So learn how to play the game. But, my big L, you talking about staying on brand. I'm going to bring it back to brand as well. My big L is people that haven't gone out there and explored American single malt whiskey yet. If you if you're a whiskey fan at all, you probably know bourbon, you might know rye. Get out there and check out American Single Malt. Wildly different from all the other American whiskeys, and it's just it's historical right now. A whole new category has been started. It's time to get out there and check it out and broaden the horizons.
I love that, man.
Absolutely.
And like I said, at the beginning of the show, like, Cedar Ridge has made me a believer. It hasn't been my profile. And again, I think it's just more of like, I don't think my palate has been acclimated to enough, to that at this point. But I've been a huge fan of everything that you do. And, to end the show, just want to say thank you, Murphy. Appreciate you jumping on, talking whiskey with us, talking Cubs baseball. It's been super fun. I definitely appreciate it. I know Mike, he's
Absolutely.
said it, he's a bourbon novice and he's learning. Every week we talk whiskey, and every week he's learned a little bit more. So yeah, just a huge thank you to you, man. We really appreciate you jumping on. It's been super cool and super fun.
Yeah, this has been great, Murphy. Thank you.
Hey, thank you guys so much for having me on. I'm very fortunate to be able to talk whiskey a lot of times, which is really cool and a lot of fun. But I'm a huge Cubs fan, and I don't get to talk Cubs often enough. So I really appreciate the opportunity to do that with you guys. Let me do that. It's been a lot of fun, and maybe we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely. I mean, as the season starts, I think we do this. We try to do it every week. I have a kind of a busy work travel schedule. I'm kind of like in and out of hair like every other week, so I'm traveling a lot. But Mike has been super flexible and trying to fit in where we can. But we would love to have you back in. Obviously this show probably went a lot longer than we normally go. We usually we usually go an hour, but we had a lot to cover today. But and we appreciate you sticking with us the whole time. But yeah, we'd love to have you on and talk more, Cubs baseball in the future. So appreciate it.
I look forward to it. Thank you guys.
All right. Well, anybody who stayed on with us the entire time, I know this is a big portion of your night, or if you just kind of jumped in and out, thank you for all the questions. Thank you for the comments. We appreciate the viewership. It looks like we had a good participation, but definitely check us out on YouTube. Follow Chicago Sports Bums. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. I'm going to put this here. We got all our handles right up here. And make sure you check out the merch on Chicago Sports Bums too. Get some Cubs, Sox, Bulls, Hawks, Bears gear. I know there's not a lot to root for, but we're from Chicago. We love them. We're going to support always. So thank you for joining. We appreciate you, and we'll hope to see you in a couple weeks.
Absolutely. Thank you all for joining.
Night,
Go
fellas.
Cubs. Good night.
Go Cubs.
Go Cubs.